Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we're going to be talking about the astrology of January 2025. I hope that you're doing well out there and having a wonderful Friday afternoon as we're recording this. Happy almost winter solstice. And we're going to go on a journey today. We're going to break down the different transits for the month. We're going to highlight it through the different decans that the sun is going to be moving through. We're going to be talking about Capricorn 2 and 3 and Aquarius 1. We're going to kind of break down all the symbolism associated with that. We're going to look at lunations, ingresses of planets into new signs, solar phases, out of bounds planets. We're going to go on a deep dive today. So I hope that you're all doing well out there. If you are joining me today, please let me know that you're here. Put a comment in the chat box. Let me know that you're here. It's always nice to see familiar faces here today. Rachel Fletcher is joining us. How you doing, Rachel? Nice to see you. Happy Solstice Eve from Roanoke, Virginia. Hope that you're doing well, my friend. Nice to see your lovely smiling face here in the chat. Susanna is joining us from Finland. How you doing, Susanna? Nice to see you. Hope you're doing well, my friend. Up there in close to the North Pole in Finland, or however close that is. I just think of you living at the North Pole for some reason, but I hope that you're doing well, friend. Tracy Gorman is here. Hello, lovelies. Tracy says, nice to see you. Hope you're doing well, Tracy, and that everything is going well your way. All right, friends, thank you so much for joining me here today. So we are going to be, like I said, going on this deep dive of the astrology of 2025. I have a few announcements before we get started. Of course, if you are interested, I do readings. And if you are thinking of all of these different transits, you're like, how am I going to navigate all this? There's a lot going on. There's a lot of Mars challenges in the month ahead. And if you want to get a leg up on your 2025 readings and whatnot, you can reach out to me at spencermichaud.com. This is the final few days of 2024, but you can look ahead to 2025. Click on the Book Now button and sign up for either a Mythos or a Kairos reading. Mythos is where we do a deep dive into your natal promise and your natal chart. The Kairos reading is one where we look ahead for the next 3 months and kind of give you an actionable plan to navigate that with grace. So I hope that you will join me. It's always nice getting to meet all of you. I've met some really amazing people from the live stream recently, and that's been really fun, and really it's great to be able to connect with people on a different level. So really appreciate that, and thank you so much for supporting the work that I do, and I hope that I'm able to be of service for you moving into the year ahead. We also have a webinar that's coming up. We have the Dignity and Devotion webinar series with special guest, my beautiful partner, Tanya Andrews, whose birthday it is today. So wish Tanya happy birthday. She is celebrating her birthday home here with me today. I'm super excited about that. We're going to do some birthday things a little bit later. But she's an excellent teacher, and she has a beautiful Etsy account called Third Coast Mojo, where she's sharing her wonderful magical wares. And we're going to be doing the Dignity and Devotion, the Sun, coming up on February the 8th, Saturday, February the 8th. Now, some of you might be saying, February the 8th, Spencer, I thought this was in January. Well, you would have been correct, but we adjusted our schedule. We were having some, the turnaround time was a little bit too tight doing one of these every month. So we spread it out to every 2 months. And the next one we're going to have is February the 8th. And I hope that that is going to work out for all of you, and that you'll join us, because we're going to be talking about all the significations associated with the sun. We're going to be talking about the mythology of the sun. We're going to talk about how to read the sun in your own chart and what that might mean for you through its dignities and its stabilities, and maybe some ways to overcome some of the challenges that you might have if you have an ill-dignified sun. We're also going to be talking about creating a magical practice and a ritual practice in relationship to the sun and all of its attributions and correspondences. So it's really been a great time so far, and I hope that you'll join us for that on February the 8th. We spread out the other ones too. So we're going to be doing the sun on February the 8th. We are going to be doing Mars on April the 12th. Then we're going to do Jupiter on June 14th. And then we'll end with Saturn on August the 9th. So that's our new schedule moving forward. Hope that you'll join us for that. Of course, Third Coast Mojo my beautiful partner's Etsy account is having a holiday sale. So if you use the code MerryMojo25, you can get 25% off everything in the store. So this is a great opportunity to load up on all of your magical needs. She's got some wonderful new things in there, including some new Venus in Libra materia, Venus in Taurus materia. There's all sorts of cool stuff there. There's some Mars and Capricorn materia if you want to get a leg up on Mars this year, or on Capricorn season and have an exalted Mars, even when Mars is in a challenging position. That can really help. There's also things that you can do as far as Venus is concerned. We're going to be talking about Venus and Pisces, and she has some wonderful Venus and Pisces offerings as well. So check that out. Take 25% off. They make great Christmas gifts. She puts a lot of love and heart into that, and I hope that you will take advantage of the sale. And then finally, if you want to support the work that I'm doing here today, you can buy me a super chat in the chat today with a little $sign on YouTube, or you can go to buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com. It goes a long way to keeping the lights on, all the equipment that goes into this, all the production values, all the software that runs all of this. This is a great way to support the channel and help keep both Tanya and I going for the year ahead. So thank you so much for everyone who has been so generous in the past. All right, friends, that is our announcements for the day. We've got some lovely birthday wishes coming in. Happy birthday, Tanya. Rachel says. Tracy Gorman says, happy birthday to your lovely lady. Yeah, we had a nice morning with the birthday, and I got her a kind of a quirky gift. She's a big fan of the movie Pootie Tang, if you are familiar with that, which is a very early 2000s kind of satire with a superhero fighting against the corporate oligarchy. And I got her this beautiful belt that is featured in that film, and a t-shirt that has the film on it. It's it's fun. It's silly, but it's fun. So I hope that all of you are doing well. Go check that movie out. It's really funny. But yes, thank you for the birthday wishes for Tanya. Thank you, Dimphy. Nice to see you here, Dimphy. Hope you're doing well, friend. Yes, Susanna says, I remember that film. It's hilarious. It's got Chris Rock in it, and Jennifer Coolidge, and Lance Crowther is Pootie Tang, and just a really funny film. We saw it the other day on like cable or something, very randomly, and I got wild hair and surprised her with the Pootie Tang magical belt. She's starting a Jupiter Perfection year, and I thought that would be a cool superhero starter kit. So thanks so much for everybody supporting Tanya on her birthday today. All right, friends, let's start diving into this. What do you say? So we're talking about the astrology of January 2025. Let's talk about a few of these big picture thoughts for the month. We've got a number of Mars oppositions this month. We're going to have Mars retrograding through Leo back into Cancer. Mars is going to oppose Pluto at the very beginning of the month. And then Mars is going to make some oppositions to the Sun and Mercury. So this is an interesting set of circumstances where we're really going to be kind of maybe feeling some tension with Mars, and maybe our energy levels are going to be fluctuating. So we will break that down, but I think that's one of the big highlights of the month, are these potential Mars opposition challenges that we're going to be going through. We also, to help mitigate some of this, we have Venus moving into Pisces. That's a really positive place for Venus. This is Venus in its exaltation. So this is a place where we might be able to overcome some of the martial challenges by practicing acceptance, practicing tolerance, practicing universal love, and being able to support each other in that regard. So we are going to see towards the very end of the month, Venus starting to apply to Neptune and the North Node. We'll talk about that in a second, but we've got a Venus North Node Neptune conjunction at the very beginning of February. But I think this is a good set of circumstances to lean into this Piscean energy of compassion, right, to overcome some of the challenges. We also have Mars and Mercury are also going to be out of bounds during the month of January. And out of bounds planets are ones that are moving in a difficult, not a difficult, but a different position that the Sun would normally move in. So the Sun has a relationship to the declination. That's sort of the how far above or below the ecliptic, the normal path of the Sun over the course of a solar year that the planet is going to move in relationship to. And Mars and Mercury are going to be sort of outside these normal path of the Sun, which sort of gives them a quality of a maverick, right? A maverick quality where they're acting maybe outside the normal expectations of society. We'll break that down for you. And then, of course, we have the North Node moving into Pisces and the South Node moving into Virgo. This is our nodal shift. So we have a point of increase, the North Node, moving into the sign of Pisces, where we might see an increase in a need to go with the flow, a need to surrender to the universal plan rather than the plans that we make consciously, rationally. We may see some interesting things surrounding the South Node in Virgo. We might see some difficulty with harvest and grain type of experiences. There could be some challenges around our desire to get organized and our desire to pass on a legacy. We could have some things that we have to deal with and some loose ends we have to tie up around that. So we'll break that down. But this is also going to lead to a series of eclipses on this axis as well. So just take a look at the whole sign house that Pisces and Virgo are placed in your natal chart. And that can give you an idea of what might be increasing, the Pisces topic, and what might be decreasing, the Virgo topic. Okay, so those are our big picture thoughts. Let's zoom in a little bit and look at our lunations. So our lunations for the month. January 6th, we have a first quarter moon in Aries, second decan of Aries, 16 degrees of Aries squaring the 16-degree Capricorn sun. We have the full moon on January the 13th at 23 degrees of Cancer. Okay, so we're having a full moon pretty close to Mars retrograde. I believe that full moon is going to be, the sun is going to be trining Uranus, so an opportunity potentially for a breakthrough. We have a last quarter moon at 2 degrees of Scorpio squaring the newly ingress sun into Aquarius. So 2 degree Scorpio moon squaring 2 degree Aquarius sun on the 21st. And then we have a new moon at 9 degrees of Aquarius on the 29th of January. So those are our lunations. We don't have 2 full moons or 2 new moons like we did. I believe we had 2 new moons last month, but just one of each phase. We have a number of ingresses this month, though. We have Venus moving into Pisces on the January the 2nd, so the very beginning of the month, which is a really nice place for Venus. That might be able to help us to soothe some of the challenges of Jupiter's retrograde cycle through its exile in Gemini as well, because Venus will be in the overcoming square, which is actually kind of a positive place, according to Hellenistic astrologers. Mars is going to retrograde back into Cancer on January the 6th, so we'll break that down. That's Mars moving into the opposite of its of a place that it's comfortable in. Basically, it's in its exile in Cancer. So this is it's in its fall in Cancer. Excuse me. So we have the exaltation of Venus, but we have the fall of Cancer, or of Mars in Cancer. So a challenging place for Mars, a challenging place for a planet that where we would normally want to move directly towards our chosen goals, we may have a circuitous route to that, where we may have one step forward, one step backwards, a little sidestepping. We may have some conflicts that come up within our domestic spheres or places where we're normally find comfort and security. So we'll have to watch out for that as well. Mercury is moving into Capricorn on January the 8th. And then the North Node is moving into Pisces on January 11th. And of course, simultaneously, because they're always exactly opposite each other, the South Node is moving into Virgo that day as well. The Sun moves into Aquarius, its exile on the 19th of January. And then finally, we have Mercury moving into Aquarius on the 27th of the month. A few solar phases. So we talked about our lunations and our ingresses. A few solar phases for the month. We have on January the 2nd, Mercury is going to exit its retrograde shadow at 22 degrees of Sagittarius. This is a position where we're going to be kind of finally starting to carve out new ground past the 22 degree Sagittarius point where it began its retrograde previously. We have Mercury moving under the sun's beams at 10 degrees of Capricorn on the 15th of January. So this is a moment of phasis, and this is also coinciding, I believe, this is coinciding with another very important aspect, the Mars-Sun opposition. So we'll have to break that down because I think there's going to be important messages around the 15th of January that we'll have to process. On January the 21st, the sun makes its conjunction with Pluto at 1 degree of Aquarius. So sort of a Pluto Kazemi, I guess you could call it. Pluto getting renewed in the heart of the sun. So we'll probably have some awareness of some of the challenges that we're up against with the Pluto and Aquarius transit. And I believe this is the first time that we'll see the sun conjoining Pluto while Pluto has been in Aquarius. And then we have Venus moving into its retrograde shadow at 24 degrees of Pisces on the 28th of January. So this is a point where Venus is going to retrograde back to. We have a Venus retrograde coming up in the early part of 2025 at about 10 degrees of Aries, and it's going to retrograde all the way back to 24 degrees of Pisces before it stations direct again. So there may be some things that we have to review moving forward, that if we initiate things in February and the end of January, we might have to review those things coming up later on in the year, like into March. And then finally, we have Uranus stationing direct at 23 degrees of Taurus on January the 30th. So some of the changes that we've probably been trying to put into place may have a better chance of succeeding and moving forward. We also have a few out-of-bounds planets, as I was alluding to earlier in the broadcast. We have Mars out of bounds all the way from December the 30th of this month, 2024, all the way forward into April the 7th. So we have an out-of-bounds Mars for pretty much all of January, all of February, all of March, and the very first week of April. That could be a little sticky. Out-of-bounds Mars may have us acting out of normally socially acceptable ways to express our anger, to express our will. We may be seeing some acts of violence in the news and in our communities that are outside the norm. We have to be very careful when we get into conflict situations with Mars out of bounds, because things can spiral out of control pretty easily when that planet isn't acting in its normal fashion. So just be very aware of that and try to be very judicious about entering into conflict. The moon is going to be out of bounds from December the 27th till the first day of January. So we start off the month with an out of bounds moon. It will then go out of bounds again on January the 9th through the 14th, simultaneously while Mercury is going out of bounds from the 9th to the 20th. So the moon and Mercury are going to go out of bounds on the same day. And then finally, we end the month with a moon out of bounds experience with the 23rd of January through the 28th. Of course, when we have the moon out of bounds, we have a kind of an emotional time. Our bodies may be pushed to their limits. We may be feeling things very deeply. Mercury out of bounds can have us communicating in ways that are outside the norm. Maybe we become more verbal. Maybe we become less verbal. Maybe we say things that we wouldn't normally say. So those are some dates to keep in mind, and to be aware of what types of influences are trying to come through us as channels for these planetary energies. I tend to think of the planets as, these forces that want to be expressed through us, through our mythological stories that we're living out on this plane of existence. And I think that the choice comes in where we may feel the influence, but we don't always have to act on the influence. And I think that that's a really important thing to remember when we're going through some really challenging times, is even if we may be feeling like we are being pushed to do something that we're uncomfortable with, or that's out of alignment with our character or our values, doesn't mean we necessarily have to listen to it. And I think that that can be really helpful when you, in the moment, you're like, I feel this anger, I need to do something with it. But we always have choices that we can make in the moment. One other thing to think about with this month, I think, is there is one short malefic enclosure. We have a malefic enclosure of Jupiter from the 27th of December till January the 2nd. So we might have some difficult times for Jupiterian types of significations, like finding honor and merit. For our faith might be tested around that period of time. I think that we might feel like in a rock and a hard place in the Gemini area of our life where Jupiter is transiting through, and that may have a difficult effect on both the Sagittarius and Pisces topics in our life, because Jupiter is going to be trying to provide resources from that to those two topics, but will have difficulty doing so, having a feeling enclosed, like back against the wall with Mars and Saturn making contacts. All right. So that's our kind of our big picture. I'm just going to check in with my chat, see if some more friends have stopped in. Robin is here. What's up, Robin? Says, hi, Spencer and crew. Robin here from Northern California. Can't wait for the beginning of the new year. Uh, and yes, you're not late, Robin. You're exactly where you need to be. We're going to be here probably for 2.5 to 3 hours, so you're fine. You'll be just fine. So settle in, get a nice cup of tea or whatever will make you cozy, and we will dive in from here. Jennifer is here, says hello from Michigan. Nice to see you, Jennifer. Jennifer is wishing Tanya happy birthday. Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate that. Having an excellent afternoon here so far, and I hope that you're doing well here in snowy Michigan, right in my backyard. Jennifer and I live in kind of some of a similar area, so hope you're doing well, friend. Alessandra is here. What's up, Alessandra? Nice to see you. Nice to see you, friend. Really, really grateful that you're joining us here today. Hope everything is going well with you and that you're having a beautiful holiday season and another local. So I'm really excited to see some of these new faces that I've been able to connect with recently and just start to make new friends and new associates. I love it. So thank you so much for being here today, Alessandra. Appreciate you. Tarja T is here from Finland. Nice to see you, Tarja. How you doing? Says the country of Santa Claus. Yes, and maybe Krampus. Like I watched a movie the other day. I think it's a little bit of a silly one. We watched Red One with Dwayne the Rock Johnson and Chris Evans, and Krampus featured very prominently in that movie. It was again a very silly movie, but yes, I hope that you're doing well, Tarja T, and that everything's going well up there in Finland. I love my Finnish friends stopping in. That's so cool that we get to connect from different parts of the world. And I always have been curious about visiting Scandinavia. So maybe someday, friends. Jennifer says, I'm heading to Florida tomorrow night, visiting my daughter and granddaughter. So excited. Need this after all the changes going on. Oh, I'm happy to hear that, friend. I'm happy to hear that you're connecting with family. So if you have family to connect with over the holidays, I hope that people will take advantage of that. And not everybody does, right? So don't take that for granted. And if you're feeling a little lonely during the holiday, I'm just sending you all some love and join up with our live streams, and we'll try to create some community here. Yes, thank you, Susanna. Okay, I think this Moy is this a Finnish greeting? Are we having the Finnish club in here? Is greeting each other? Is that hello in Finnish? I'll have to teach me how to say it, and then I'll have to greet all of you in your native tongue. Let's see. Okay, good. Jennifer, you're getting to be near the water is healing and regenerative. Absolutely. All right, friends, let's start diving into it. What do you say? So what we're going to do is we're going to start by taking a look at the sun in the second 10-degree section of Capricorn. So what I would like to do for our deep dive into the month ahead is what I'd like to tell you a little bit about each of the decans that the sun is going to move through. If you're new here, the decans are a 10-degree division of each 30-degree sign. 12 30-degree signs divided into 36 decans. And this gives us a little bit of a different face to each of the signs. And they're each associated with a tarot card. And it can give us a visual reminder of some of the themes that we might be going through. Not every part of the sign has the same impetus or the same narrative. So we'll be able to look at it through that lens because the sun brings a big spotlight on what we might be feeling as a collective. So I find that the solar decan that something is moving through is really good for more collective horoscopes because we're all kind of experiencing some similar themes. As I'm recording this, the sun is moving through the last degrees of Sagittarius 3, where we're trying to get a push to the finish line, getting to that winter solstice. And of course, we'll be moving through the first decan of Capricorn through the end of December. But in the beginning of January, we have the second decan of Capricorn. And I'll make this bigger so you can see it. So let me just back up for a second. And these are some slides from my Decans of Capricorn webinar that you can find on my store at spencermichaud.com. But we see at the winter solstice, which we will experience tomorrow as I'm recording this, the return of the light, right? And we're juggling the past and the future. And we're kind of trying to take stock and see what resources we have to start building moving forward. Now, when we go forward to Capricorn 2, we see something syncretized, this decan syncretized with the Three of Pentacles. The book T calls this the Lord of Material Works, or the book of Thoth calls it just the Lord of Works. Austin Coppock, in his wonderful book, 36 Faces, calls it the Pyramid. That's really interesting because we see three figures in this Three of Pentacles card that's associated with it, kind of building a very ornate structure. We've gathered all the resources, we've decided on what we want to build, and now we're coming together with members of our community to work on an ambitious project. We've got the artist, the artisan himself. We have the clergy, seeing if it has meaning, spiritual meaning, the project does. And we also have someone who is related to the sort of the political spectrum. So like someone in the government basically saying, okay, what's the budget for this? How are we going to make this work within the guidelines and limitations that we have? So these are all like considerations that we have when we're trying to build something ornate. So themes when the sun's moving through Capricorn 2 are architectural designs and blueprints. If you have this in your natal chart, I've literally had clients that were architects that had prominent placements in Capricorn 2. Ambitious projects and daunting tasks. This is one of the challenges we have to be careful of when we move through Capricorn 2 is being overly ambitious. We can get a little bit overly ambitious to the point where we burn ourselves out or we burn our bodies out. This is a Mars-ruled decan, so we might be really trying to push through to the other side. But again, there is a spirit in this decan called Hygeia, which roughly translates to health. So to be able to work on these ambitious projects, we have to take care of our health. Capricorn 1 has the spirit Asclepius, the healer on the ship of the Argo. And then we have, I believe Hygeia was related to Asclepius, maybe his daughter, something of that nature, but the personification of health itself. So we might also be gathering resources during Capricorn 2 and support. I think not just resources, but actual intellectual support, like people that can support our projects. We don't have to do everything ourselves all the time. I think that this is something that we are really kind of struggling with as a global community, is this independent streak where we feel like we have to do everything ourselves and we can't delegate anything, we can't work with other people. That to me that's not how nature works. Nature works in a system of independent, interconnected. That's what I'm trying to spit out today. The words aren't flowing as well as they should, but interconnectedness, ecosystems, right? And human beings are the same way. When we're trying to achieve something ambitious, utilizing each person's individual skill set, I think can be a way to get to our destination much faster. Bina in Asya. This is a reference to the Kabbalistic tree of life. And Bina is the Saturnian kind of chakra center, Sephira center on that tree. And Saturn talks about castrating possibilities to bring something into form. So what Saturn will like to do, and we say limitation, castrating possibilities into form. When we're making choices, we have to eliminate the other possibilities. So that's the castration part. We're castrating our other options so that we can focus our attention on the one that's most important to us in the moment. This decan can also be seen as focal point on proper maintenance of the body and mental health, in reference to that Hygeia spirit that we see listed in a fragmentary Hellenistic text called 36 Heirs of the Zodiac. That's where we get some of these daimons and spirits from. It's just this little text. It's also called Cosmos of Jerusalem, if you're looking that up online. And it has these kind of spirits associated with these decans. The decans were supposed to be kind of like houses for different deities as well, all the way back to Egyptian culture. So really interesting little nuggets there. This decan of Capricorn can also be associated with the assembly line, means of production, figuring out how you're going to get from point A to point B in a physical process. So questions you can ask yourself while the sun is in Capricorn 2 from January 1st to January 9th. What resources do you need to build? What kind of materials do you need to do the ambitious project that you have in mind? How can you gather support for your vision? Of course, you don't have to do everything yourself. Like this is something I'm still learning too. I tend to be somewhat of a independent, solitary person, and learning how to team up with people. I'm learning this a lot through teaming up with my beautiful partner on these webinars. Is how do you delegate tasks? How do you complement each other with each other's skill set, right? And it's a learning process, and we're not always going to do it perfectly. But I think that the more that you can learn how to work with a diverse range of people, I think the more success that you can have. I always think about someone like Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson is this supernova of an individual talent, right? He was a very hard worker. He was forced into being a hard worker as a young person, but also had this very deep emotional and kind of spiritual connection when he was singing. But Michael Jackson did not exist in a vacuum. He had someone like Quincy Jones, who recently passed away, who was an excellent producer that helped his vision to manifest. He also had just teams and teams and teams of people helping him to do what he needed to do at the height of his fame, etc. So when you see really successful people out there, there's always a lot of people who are supporting that person in the background, etc. And it's never just this one individual just powering through. And this is true for most of us. Even if we consider ourselves very independent, sometimes we take for granted some of the support that we have. You can also ask yourself during Capricorn too, is this plan in service of the self or the collective? This is an area of the zodiac where we're very concerned with material reality. It's an earth sign. It's an ambitious sign. And we have to be very careful when we're working with material ambition that we aren't just trying to serve the self. It is part of our very, I guess, somewhat narcissistic culture that we are trying to grab as much as we can because it's been modeled for us by people who are grabbing as much as they can for themselves. And it's getting worse as we go forward. We have a widening gap in wealth gap and wealth inequality, especially in Western civilization in America, etc. And people who have obscene amounts of wealth are starting to gather power. And a lot of times people are having, I guess what you'd call an aspirational vision of joining that very elite club, which is only literally a handful of people. And it leads to people making a lot of choices where they're pushing their own ethical boundaries, sometimes out of necessity, but other times out of aspiration and ambition. And I think that it's very important to think about whether you're utilizing your ability to create, to manifest, if it does serve a purpose for the greater good, other than just hoarding wealth. And this is coming from a Cancer to opposite sun sign who has really struggled sometimes with the way that society works in this way. Doesn't mean that I'm right all the time. There are definitely some times where having a little bit of material stability is very important. And I have some wonderful Capricorn people in my life who understand that being able to utilize your resources in service of not only yourself, you should take yourself into the equation, but in service of your community and your collective is a way to create reciprocal relationships that are sustainable. When we hoard, that relationship isn't sustainable. And eventually it will lead to your own demise. I truly believe that. So being able to share and to understand how what you're doing is in service of others can help lead to a sustainable wealth rather than one that will ultimately lead to failure. Is this project you're working on practical or hubristic? Again, the dangers of hubris. That was one of the most punishable things by the gods in ancient civilizations, hubris, right? Thinking you know more than the divine, thinking you know more than nature, etc., pushing the limits of nature. That's hubris. And oftentimes when we come into alignment with a hubristic vision, that again is setting us up for failure. So be very careful about that as we move forward through Capricorn season as well, especially with the Mars oppositions with the Capricorn Sun and Mercury coming up. And Pluto for that matter. But the Mars-Pluto opposition is going to happen over Leo and Aquarius. So a slightly different set of themes there. Are you trying to build a Tower of Babel? This is an important theme from the Decanic writings, like this Tower of Babel, a biblical story of people trying to build basically a ladder tower to heaven through material means. And of course, we had the lightning bolt that struck it down. You could see this kind of in the tower card, right? Where because of their hubris of thinking that they could reach the summit of spiritual awareness through material means, it led to their downfall. So again, like really questioning whether you're trying to, where is the meaning infused with it? And a lot of times we mistake selfish desires for some kind of higher purpose. So we really have to look ourselves in the mirror and self-examine when we get to this point. And then finally, how can you take care of your body? How can you take care of your body while you toil? Again, a reference to Hygeia. When we're doing this hard work, Capricorn 2 is a hard worker, right? If you have the sun in this decan, you're probably no stranger to hard work. And how can you maintain your health so that you can sustain that over the long haul rather than burn out? So when we're doing the hard work of building something that's important to us and important to society, we need to make sure that we're taking time to rest, that we're taking time to eat, taking time to sleep, all of those things. So really taking stock of our health. A lot of people during this decan make New Year's resolutions to maintain their health because they know that if they want to sustain their energy throughout the year ahead, they need to make sure that their body's getting everything it needs. All right, let me check in with the chat here. Got more birthday wishes. Thank you, Dimphy, for Tanya. Dimfana Adriana. Is this a different... Do we have two different Dimphys? Or is this the same Dimphy? Dimphy, are you the same Dimphy? Or is this is Dimfana different than the Dimphy on Facebook? I'm just curious. Susanna says, yes, Moy is like high in Finnish. Oh, and Spencer, Finnish is as northern as Alaska, but the Gulf Stream keeps the temperature warmer here. Oh my goodness. Y'all are so lucky. Like, you pronounce Moy just as it's written. Oh, good. Sounds like my pronunciation might be correct then, hopefully. So Moy, all of you friends in Finland. That's so fun. I love connecting with just different cultures. It really fills my heart up to be a global citizen rather than just of one particular country or boundary, etc. And this work has really allowed me to do that, and it's something I really value. Daria T says, I have my moon in Cap 2, an architect of emotional trust as a psychotherapist. Ooh, I like that. I like that. And traditionally they would say that's a little bit of a challenging position for the moon, being in its exile. But you might be able to create structure, right? Emotional structure for people. You might be someone who is very, very tough emotionally, and you can handle people being able to share some of their most challenging things, right? I think that's beautiful work that you're doing, and I hope that you're finding a lot of joy in that. Susanna says, I have my moon in Cap 3. So all our Finnish folks are Cap moons, right? Most of them here today. Maybe there's something about living in Finland, that maybe all the babies are born when the moon's in Capricorn. These tough Scandinavians. I love it. Well, Moy, friends. Moy. I've got it. Okay, let's start looking at some of the transits during Capricorn 3. And I'm going to bring my screen up here for you. And here we have our chart. And this is January 1st. This is 12 noon Eastern time in America. So this is, make the appropriate adjustments for your time zone. But let's just let's take stock of where everything's at. We've got the sun in Capricorn 2, 11 degrees of Capricorn to start off the year. We have Mercury still in its exile in Sagittarius at 20 degrees of Sagittarius. Pluto, of course, has ingressed into Aquarius, so we're dealing with all the Pluto and Aquarius challenges. Venus is still in the early degrees of Aquarius on January 1st, but is going to ingress into Pisces the next day. So an improvement in Venus's condition by Hellenistic dignity factors. We've got Mars retrograde in Leo, really in a tight opposition with Pluto at the beginning of the month. And we're going to have this perfect or come together, that aspect come together by January the 3rd. And we'll talk about that in a second. But that's one of the main things we're going to be feeling really intensely at the beginning of the month is this Mars-Pluto opposition. Jupiter's still retrograde in Gemini too. So we're probably doing some evaluation about all of the different pathways that we could choose. Maybe there's some ambiguity and confusion around which pathway would be the best one moving forward. Jupiter will station direct in the beginning of February, so just hang in there. Those of you who are Jupiter heavy, like all the Sagittarians and Pisceans and Geminis for that matter, just hang in there because I think there will be some clarity that we get by the end of January. Saturn's still hanging out in Pisces, second decan of Pisces, asking us to be realistic about our skill set. And Jupiter's starting to come into a square with Saturn, okay? Retrograde into a square with Saturn. So a lot of the imagined pathways and possibilities may come into a dash of cold water about what we can really handle. This was something that my partner and I recently experienced. We've been really grinding away at our planet webinars. We were doing one a month for the last 3 months, which there's about 40 to 50 slides, and they're advertised as 2.5 hours, but they've been going about 4 hours with breaks. So they're more like an all afternoon workshop. And putting that much information together, things can be very taxing on your free time, etc. And we decided that wasn't sustainable for the next 4 months because we were starting to get burnt out, and we had to acknowledge our limitations with the life that we had, and we didn't give up on it. We just expanded the lead time, so one every 2 months instead of one every month, to bring some balance into our lives. And this was, honestly, friends, this was a result of the full moon in Gemini 3 that we recently experienced, where sometimes you can't juggle all the plates. Sometimes something has to be sacrificed so that you can devote time to your highest priorities. And in our case, it was just expanding our time frame, creating space. So I'm curious if any of you have created some space in your life recently. And you might be really coming into an awareness of that, especially as Jupiter squares Saturn over the course of the month, is that sometimes we just can't do it all, or we just can't do it all right now. Maybe we just need more time to do it all. And patience and delayed gratification, I think, is one of the greatest lessons that we can learn as we become physical and spiritual adults. I think that this culture that we live in of instant gratification, that's not how nature works. And our greatest teacher is the natural world, in my opinion. And it can really show us how things can function harmoniously. And if we take our cues from that, when we plant a seed, we can't force it to grow any faster than it is programmed to grow. Yes, we can create the right conditions for it to grow healthily. Yes, we can give it light, water, nutrients. But those things have their limitations, right? We're not going to get a tree that is 10 feet tall from a seed in a week. It just doesn't happen. That's not in the seed's programming. Now, we can make sure that seed gets to 10 feet tall in 10 years by nurturing that tree, by watering it, by creating the right conditions for its growth, by protecting it. But when we're working on projects that are important to us, we have to nurture it so that it can grow at its own pace. And I think that acknowledging that as we begin the month of January is going to be very important. Jennifer says, my dad's Mercury is in the second decan of Capricorn. He's always wanted to be an architect. There you go, see? And ended up building and designing decks whenever we moved, and taught my son when he was older. That's great, Jennifer. I love hearing when we see the decans in action, because the decans often will show us very tangible expressions within people's charts and lives, etc. So I'm really excited to hear when we make those connections. So thank you for sharing that. Susanna says, I've had to learn to tolerate unfinished work around the house. Everything doesn't have to be perfect all the time. Yeah, Susanna, I agree. When we get busy with things, something has to be sacrificed, right? And I've seen pictures of your house, Susanna. I'm sure you have a very crafted public persona. It's beautiful, by the way. Like it's a beautiful home. And I'm sure a tiny bit of clutter here and there is probably not going to be the end of the world, right? Just take pictures in a different angle, like, right? No, but it's true though. It's true. And I think that this is one of the things, like with my partner and I, that we were discussing is, yes, we could get the work done in the period of time that we set for ourselves, but what we had to sacrifice was too much. We had to sacrifice any free time, any rest time, house cleaning sacrifice. Like this is, Tanya's got 2 weeks off from her job in the starting today actually. And one of our goals for the next few weeks is just clean the house, get some things, decluttered, get rid of some stuff, organize some things. And it's nice when you have extra time to do that. But when we have deadlines and projects, sometimes it's okay if things aren't always perfect all the time. And I agree with you 100% on that, Susanna. So finding the right balance, I think, can be really important during these times. All right. So knowing our limitations, that's what we're talking about with January here. Understanding that we just can't do everything all the time, and that's okay. Accepting that. As the nodes move from Aries and Libra to Pisces and Virgo, it's accepting our imperfections, accepting our flaws, and understanding that sometimes that's what makes us beautiful, right? And I think that accepting the flaws in our lives, and that the divine has a plan, even if we can't see it. I think that's really important too. Even if we don't know exactly where we're going, the river of life, if we let go of the oars, stop paddling against the current, exhausting ourselves, it will take us, I think, often where we're meant to be. Yes, we can steer a little bit, okay? No shame in steering. But to try to paddle in a direction that your life is not taking you in that's the path to suffering. I've said this a number of times with clients recently, but I believe that there is a difference between pain and suffering. Pain is inevitable in life. There's going to be painful experiences. There's going to be loss. There's going to be disappointments. There's going to be failures. But when we suffer is when we don't accept that is part of our life, and we live in either denial, live in a fantasy, or we live in hanging on to something that is passing out of our life. That's when we create suffering. And again, I think there's a choice to suffer rather than acceptance. This is the Stoic in me talking, right? Accepting it helps us go with that helps alleviate. It's the steam valve that helps alleviate some of that. Doesn't mean it can't be painful. It is. Life has painful experiences. But again, coming into alignment with where your life is taking you can lead to more peace. It can lead to more inner peace, inner satisfaction. Okay, this is one of the themes that we see in the decans of Pisces, satisfaction. This is the second decan related to the 9 of Cups. Finding that alignment with the Tao. This is what we call the alignment with the Tao in the Taoist philosophy. Aligning with the natural rhythms of your life. Man, I'll tell you what, you have a lot less anxiety when you do that. And I think we're going to really need to lean into that as we move forward into 2025. Alessandra says, this is off topic, but I just realized the giant complicated graphics project I'm working on for my job uses the acronym MARS. And suddenly occurred to me, why it's been such a challenge. Oh my goodness. It's right there spelled out for you, isn't it? It's because Mars is retrograde right now. Mars is moving backwards. The project is probably delayed, I would guess, if that's what it's called. Or it's also running into challenges with just the social challenges that might be out there, like economic challenges, all of those things. So it's really interesting where we see some of these are messages, right? These are symbolic messages that come to us. Names are very powerful. And when we name something after literally a planet that has thousands of years of mythology attached to it, it's probably going to take on some of that energy. So that's an interesting story there, Alessandra. Okay, so let's move forward here. So let's start with so we've kind of set the scene for January. Sun in Cap 2. And let's move forward to this January 2nd. And here we have Venus moving into Pisces. Okay, so here's Venus moving into Pisces. We'll move a couple hours ahead so that we can see it actually ingress. It's later in the day. Okay, so there it is. 0 degrees Pisces, late in the day, January 2nd. In my time zone. Your time zone, the date may vary. We're also experiencing Mercury exiting its retrograde shadow at 22 degrees of Sagittarius. So we're breaking new ground. This to me is the energy of breaking new ground, especially with Venus moving into Pisces. This decan of Pisces is related to the Eight of Cups card. In the Eight of Cups card, we see someone who is leaving behind 8 stacked cups, going off into the marsh, hearing a siren song, being called to find a greater purpose. I think that the story of Pisces talks a lot about overcoming materialism or just discarding it completely in search of spiritual meaning and awareness, an inner vision rather than an externalized manifestation/project. So when things get difficult externally, oftentimes we are enriched through our inner life, through our faith, through our ability to see what is not there. This is, to me, another Piscean thing. It's being able to visualize what isn't real, quote unquote. Okay. Pisces teaches us that there are different layers of reality. There's the physical layer, there's the metaphorical layer, there's the spiritual layer, there's the archetypal layer. And Alessandra just gave us a really beautiful example of this. She has a physical project that has a metaphysical layer underneath it, mycelium. I love this. I love the metaphor of mycelial networks underground. Mycelial networks are the interconnections that mushrooms have, where we only see the fruiting body of the mushroom that comes above the surface, but they are so connected by miles and miles and miles of networks, like network cables basically communicating with one another. And that to me is how reality works. Our lived reality is the fruiting body of a mushroom. Our spiritual reality is the mycelial network that connects us. And Austin Coppock talks about Indra's net in 36 Spaces. And I think Indra's net is one manifestation of a fungal mycelial network, right? So how do we embrace that reality that we can't see? And I think this is going to be super important in the beginning of the month, because we're heading into a period of time where there are a lot of changes happening. Some of them might be good, but some of them might be very difficult to process. We might not enjoy the changes that are coming politically, socially, etc. And I think that there's going to be a lot of painful things that we're witnessing that we may feel powerless to change in the interim. You're not powerless to change those things. Let me say that right away. But it may feel that way. But the beginning to creating change, especially when what we see is not what we want, is being able to visualize what we do want. Now, I don't think that this is necessarily just metaphysical mumbo jumbo. I used to have a little bit more of a dreamer's quality to the way I thought about this. But the more I've studied it, I think that there's practical ways to think about this too. First of all, there are some scientific supports for our ability to create reality through our attention, what we focus on. Like, there are experiments that show that atoms can snap in and out of existence based on the experimenter's attention to those atoms. So there is a level of reality where our focal point becomes very important. But just in a very practical way, to be able to bring something into existence, oftentimes we have to see it in our mind, creative visualization. Now, that doesn't mean that it's just going to manifest just from visualizing it. There are steps that you have to take, actionable steps, once you have the vision. But I'll tell you what, friends, having the vision and having at least a general idea of where you're going, sometimes you can manifest way faster than if you don't have any vision at all. Okay? Like, here's an example. I bought a gift for my partner for her birthday. That vision was inspired by just a random event. I saw the movie that she had told me that she loved, right? There was a movie on cable, Pootie Tang, for those of you who missed the first part of the show. One of her favorites from the early 2000s. Basically about a superhero that fights back against corporate oligarchy. Like, it's very poignant still, but it's very satirical. It's funny. And seeing that and hearing her joy around it, a vision was sparked of the superhero has a belt that plays a prominent role and has a beautiful huge belt buckle. And that vision helped spark action. And the action was searching for this. If I hadn't had the vision, that would have never come into our existence. That vision was sparked something and sparked an action to help create and manifest reality. That's a practical way of creative visualization. It's a practical understanding of it. And it's really not all that crazy to think about. Like, even this Virgo stellium, Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, that you're talking to today, realizes that we have to be able to visualize something before it comes into existence. So I think that that's going to be much more supported with Venus moving into Pisces. Now, with Mercury exiting its shadow, I do think that 22 degrees is a really important degree for the medical industry. 22 degrees is a fixed star in the sky called Ras El Hag. And Ras El Hag is the main star in the constellation Asclepius, who is the healer, or Ophiuchus. Ophiuchus is another name for that constellation. And when we see prominent planets contacting that point in the sky, oftentimes there's news about medicine, about medical industry, about diseases. And we had an entire Mercury retrograde period where a health insurance CEO was murdered, and it sparked this entire conversation about the healthcare industry, about medicine, and about how fair it is, how fair it's not. Okay? Like, it sparked an entire awareness of it. Now, what I expect to see around January 2nd is what happens next. We know that the system is unfair. We know that the system is exploitive. We know that people aren't getting what they need. So what happens next? And I think that by January 2nd, we might see some changes around that. I hope we do. I hope that they're positive. We might see just what the results of that moving forward. So keep your eyes in the news for something related to that around this period of time when Venus ingresses into Pisces, which talks about care on a universal level. And then Mercury exiting its shadow very close to a fixed star that is often related to medical issues. Okay, let's keep going. Now, on January the 3rd, this is one of our big transits for the month, and for 2025 for that matter. So this is our Mars Pluto opposition. And I'll go back a couple hours here. You can see this is exact. When is it exact? Early in the day, right? So here is Mars retrograding through Leo, opposing Pluto in Aquarius. And Mars-Pluto oppositions, Mars-Pluto squares, they expose corruption. Pluto is a planet that likes to reveal things that have been buried or repressed. It often talks about power and the underlying machinations that people need to go through to achieve power, to abuse power, to bring equilibrium back to power. And when Mars, the planet of violence, the planet of anger, the planet of asserting our will, it's also a planet of misfortune. It's a planet of unearned misfortune, oftentimes, because it is part of the lunar sect, the lunar team of planets. And the lunar team of planets has an association with a Greek goddess named Tuke, which is the random distributions of fate or chance. So when we have a random distribution of negative fortune, potentially, with Mars, opposing a planet of exposure of corruption, sometimes we will experience negative events that expose corruption. So this might be something along those lines. Now, Mars is moving through Leo. Leo is the planet of the king. It's the planet of the haves. It's the planet of the central power. Aquarius is the sign, I should say. Aquarius is the sign of the exile, of the masses, of the people that are on the fringe, that have been cast out, the people that are having challenging experiences because they are not in the center. It is also a decan, Aquarius 1, related to Schadenfreude. You know, this is one of the things that they talk about in the decanic literature, Schadenfreude, taking pleasure in other people's pain, which is what we've seen with the news story around United Healthcare, the Schadenfreude. But Schadenfreude often is not just random pleasure at someone's misfortune. Schadenfreude comes because people themselves are experiencing pain. I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind about everything that we're seeing in the news with people taking pleasure at someone else's misfortune, is those people themselves are suffering. And how do we make changes without necessarily having to expand suffering, right? And I don't have a great answer to that. I think it's important to have the conversation first. When we see suffering in the world, when we see pain, have the conversation first. And then how do we move forward? How do we find the right solutions to it? Many people will agree or disagree about what methods will help actually create change. And again, I don't have the capital T truth for you on that. But I do think that we will see a conflict or an expansion of the conflict or a peak of the conflict between the haves and the center and those in exile. Now, one of the things that we're also experiencing as we move forward into the new year is, I don't know if there was news on this today, but there's been a lot of conversations about approving the end of the year budget in America and to avoid a government shutdown. And there was an agreement that was made with Republicans and Democrats in America. And then the new oligarch, I don't know if he's a new oligarch, but the oligarch who has ascended to power, Mr. Musk, has, advised that people reject that because it doesn't have things in it that he deems important, which it quite possibly could lead to a government shutdown, which has a very negative effect on a lot of people. This could be a peak of that conflict. That to me feels like that conflict on some level. The haves versus the have-nots, people who are in power and control much of the wealth of this country and the world, exposing themselves as plutocrats, right? People who are trying to exert their will on the people at the expense of the people. There could be things in our own lives where we have challenges of pride, where our own pride, our own desire to be seen, or the pressure to be seen, could run into censorship. I think this is another Mars-Pluto opposition challenge, is to be seen or not to be seen, especially over Leo and Aquarius. The first decan of Leo talks about the pressure cooker. It's a Saturn-ruled decan where we feel the pressure to compete for the spotlight. Aquarius 1 is saying, hey, I don't want to compete for that spotlight. I don't even agree with the rules of this game. Okay? So we've also seen, coming into the new year, attack on free press, where there's lawsuits that are happening trying to suppress the press in America, and possibly in other countries as well. But this is just what's on in my immediate vision. And this is something where, how do we deal with this limiting of free speech or things of that nature as well? This is something that Joy Usher, an excellent astrologer from Australia, talks about in her great books, A Tiny Universe. She talks a lot about Aquarius, and this is true for Pluto and Aquarius. Talks a lot about Aquarius and Saturn's hosting of that particular sign as only allowing certain narratives to be seen. It's limiting the amount of information. Saturn is a planet of limitations. And when it's in its air sign domicile, it's limiting the narrative that can get out there, right? She talks about it like as brainwashing on some level. So the limitations of what we are allowed to know is probably something that's going to create a lot of tension when Mars and Pluto come in opposition as well. And this is true for in the news too, that we're seeing a potential ban on the social media platform TikTok, which isn't just for teenagers doing silly dances. A lot of these social media platforms that are, some of them not controlled by the United States, provide a platform for people to share things in their communities that might otherwise be oppressed. Like it's almost like a news type of sharing as well. And Twitter used to be this as well before it was bought by an oligarch. So this is another attempt for limiting the ability for people to communicate with one another outside of the established power structure. And I really think that this is important to spend time on with Mars retrograde opposite Pluto, because the attack from the established, entrenched power structure on the people that are on the fringe of society is starting to ramp up. I mean, and not starting, it's just ramping up. It's been happening for a long period of time. So something to be aware of as we move forward is, how can we maintain our sense of authenticity as we may have our voices curtailed? How do we stay true to our values, even when our values are out of alignment with the people in power? I don't have a great answer for you yet, but you're already seeing people being punished for being their authentic self, and then people kind of getting wary of expressing themselves because they want to avoid punishment, which is natural. Nobody wants to be punished, but we're in for an interesting time period moving forward, and this is true for those of us in astrology and metaphysics. Even these types of industries are potentially that I'm not sure who it hurts. Like I don't know what the complaint is, but it may be even more difficult to talk about these types of topics moving forward, depending on how far the censorship goes. So keep that in mind as we move forward. Lauren, what's up, friend? Says, hi, all. You're on fire today, Spence. Very informed. I love it. I'm doing my best, Lauren. Hope you're doing well. Catching that Aquarian vibe for sure. Yes. Well, I think as a observer of what is happening in society, I'm trying to stay current as much as I can without fear-mongering. I don't think that it is healthy to fear-monger, but I do think understanding the symbolism and understanding what adjustments we might have to make, that to me is coming into alignment with the Tao. When we talked about this as a Aquarian theme, but also a Piscean theme with Pisces North Node coming, if you are not accepting the changes that are happening, okay, and I don't mean accepting as far as like agreeing with them, but if you are denying that those changes are happening and not making the proper adjustments, that to me is swimming upstream. And all I'm doing today, friends, is trying to prepare you for some of the changes that are happening, that we're already seeing happening. These types of changes oftentimes can be like the frog in the boiling pot of water. We don't completely understand what's happening in the moment until it's almost too late and we've been boiled alive. So by paying attention and at least understanding what the symbolism is talking about can help hopefully prepare us to be able to maintain our sanity, our freedom, our authenticity within a very changing world. Okay, so acknowledging the changes is important. And again, not all the changes are necessarily going to be bad. I'm a huge believer that sometimes things get more painful before they get a lot better. We talk about this a lot with the Taoist story of the horse, where we talk about that we need to be careful about judging something right away before we see it play out in the long term. Okay? Doesn't mean we shouldn't protect ourselves and those that are vulnerable, but we need to see how things are going to play out, because the negative event could be the impetus for a much greater change. Okay? A much greater change that could be very positive. That's where the faith comes in, being able to see something that isn't there. Like, if all we are focusing on is the negative event that we're seeing and ignoring the possibility of what could be, even if it's not what we see, then we've lost, right? We have to be able to hang on to be our visionary qualities to bring them into manifestation, even if they're so far away from what we see. You know, John Lennon told us this, right? You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. Imagine, right? He had a very prominent, I believe he had a prominent Fomalhaut placement in his chart. I don't remember exactly the planet, but he had something on Pisces, like 3 or 4 degrees of Pisces, and he wrote Imagine. He's a dreamer. It could be that the song was released around that period of time. I'm trying to remember that, but he teaches us that we have to be able to hold on to that vision. And was John Lennon a perfect person? No. Did he do some things in his life that were horrible? Yeah, he did. But he also did a lot of good things too. And I think that this is some of the things that we need to hold on to, especially when we see things in our life that brings us pain. All right, so that's our Mars retrograde opposite Pluto, January 3rd. A couple other dates to keep in mind. We had our first Mars-Pluto opposition at 29 degrees of Cancer and Capricorn on November the 3rd. So right before our election in the United States. We have our second one here in Leo and Aquarius at 1 degree with the retrograde Mars on the 3rd of January. We will have our third and final opposition, at least in this cycle, with a direct Mars at 3 degrees of Leo and Aquarius on April the 27th. So this is sort of the middle of this cycle. And even if everything isn't solved, I'm sure that everything is not going to be solved, but let it unfold. See where we're going. And we might have a lot more information about where we're heading with all of this by late April. Doesn't mean you don't prepare either. Being prepared is very important. All right, let's keep going. On January the 6th, Mars will retrograde into Cancer. Now, for those of you in America who are paying attention, in the last few years, that date is very familiar. That's the date of the insurrection on the United States Capitol during the last election cycle, before Joe Biden took the oath of office in January. So this is an anniversary that's difficult in America right now, and there's a lot of questions that are asked about what we might be doing moving forward. Mars is in its fall in Cancer. This is a difficult place for Mars. This is a place where it's very uncomfortable. It is generally, it struggles in this house because it's the house of the moon. First of all, the moon's related to the body. It's related to nurturing. It's related to life. Cancer is a life-giving, growth-orientated sign. Mars has been associated with being the antithesis of life. Like, it severs and separates us from a body It literally does that in Scorpio season, right? That's where the bodies are severed from their spiritual vitality and the form is returned back to the earth and the spirit is liberated. In Aries, we're severing our consciousness from the collective to individuate and then infuse into a body. But Mars in Cancer, there's severing from a place where we were expecting growth, severing in a place where we were expecting support. This is something where our energy levels may fluctuate because Cancer is not a sign associated with directly moving towards our goals, like Mars in Capricorn. It's exaltation. It takes it one step at a time to move up the mountain to the peak. Cancer says, Cancer has doubts. It says, well, maybe this possibility. I don't know about this. Let me take a step backwards, sideways. It is not necessarily the most direct of houses. And especially with Mars retrograde, Mars is going to be reviewing these things. I imagine in America, this is going to be an interesting date because we will probably be talking a lot about the actions of the insurrection back in, what was that, 2020? And reviewing that. And because there's been promises for those folks who are convicted of basically treason, of pardoning them moving forward. So there may be reviews of that event potentially coming forward. Now, what does that mean for us personally? I think that Mars in Cancer can bring conflict in a place where we expected support. It can bring domestic conflicts. It can bring conflict with our parents, our mothers, if you have them. It can bring conflict with children and with things associated with children, with women, or things associated with women. Could be conflict with things like pregnancies and things of that nature. Know that this has been a big topic in America is abortion rights. These things could be back in the conversation or the awareness of the masses. It's a difficult transit. And how do we deal with it? How do we navigate it gracefully? Well, first of all, when Mars moves backwards, don't expect things to go from point A to point B quickly. I think that baking in more time to do something. When Mars is in a place like Cancer that doesn't move from point A to B directly, baking in some time to have a few detours, right? I think that's important. And understanding that sometimes conflict within families, domestic situations, sometimes that can actually lead to some breakthroughs too. So as long as you are fighting fair, I guess I will say. And you need to be very careful about this Mars retrograde in Cancer, especially because it's out of bounds. Remember in the beginning of the show, I talked about an out of bounds Mars does not act in the normal fashion. It acts outside of the socially acceptable ways. It doesn't play by the rules. It doesn't play by the rules of engagement. I saw a movie the other day that reminded me of Mars out of bounds. It was called The Bike Riders. And it was spoilers ahead if you haven't seen it. Okay, I'm gonna give it a spoiler. But it's a very interesting Mars retrograde out of bounds kind of look. So in The Bike Riders, it's about motorcycle culture in the, what was it? The 60s? Late 60s in Chicago? Early 70s, late 60s? And there's a leader of one of the biker gangs that is wanting to engage with a challenge from a young up-and-comer to his authority. And they have this predetermined set of rules where they ask each other, fists or knives? And in this particular case, they chose knives. Well, the leader of the gang, again, spoilers, if you don't want to hear about this and you haven't seen Bike Riders, mute for a second. But spoilers, the young person does not bring a knife to the knife fight that they have agreed upon. He brings a gun and he guns him down. And that's it. This is Mars. To me, this is Mars out of bounds. The agreed upon rules were knives, and the person brought a gun to the fight. So I want you to be very careful about getting into conflicts where you have expectations that there are certain rules that people will follow or that lines that they won't cross. Because with Mars out of bounds, retrograde, and in Cancer, there's no rules anymore. All bets are off on some level. And I would encourage you maybe not to get involved in those arguments because things can spiral out of control very quickly. All right. Jolie James is here. What's up, Jolie? Nice to see you. Hope you're doing well. Hope you are doing well, friend. All right, so let's move forward. And we are going to look at a couple more aspects before we get to the end of Capricorn 2, and then we'll take a little break. So, simultaneously, before we move off the 6th, another thing that's happening on that day, same time that Mars is retrograding back into Cancer, we have our first quarter moon. Okay, so here's the moon at about 16 degrees of Aries, squaring the sun at Capricorn, 16 degrees Capricorn. Now, we've gone over the themes of Capricorn 2, building with other people, ambitious projects, maybe potentially hubris of overshooting the mark, maybe trying to build something meaningful, but potentially through overly material means, like the Tower of Babel. Now, the second decan of Aries talks about royal decrees. Remember when we talked about severing and separating from the collective in Aries 1? That says, this is who I'm not. They say, I don't want to be part of the group anymore. I need to strike out on my own and individuate. When we get to Aries 2, we say, this is who I am, right? This says, I am this, and love it or leave it, right? So there might be a kind of an energy of very individualistic, declarative statements. This is the decan where the sun has its degree of exaltation, 19 degrees of Aries. So we may be running into the challenge of our own personal, deeply held desires and values running into the needs of the project. Think about that for a second. The project itself might be Capricorn 2, the ornate structure. So be very careful about how you are expressing yourself. If you're working together with others, there could be conflict of interest because you say, well, this is what I want to happen. And someone else could be like, well, this is what I want to happen. And that could lead to some arguments and some breakdowns potentially. So watch out for that around January the 6th. Jennifer says, my daughter-in-law is pregnant and Mars is on her ascendant in Leo. Jupiter is conjunct her ascendant and Saturn is opposing it. Mars is on her ascendant and Jupiter is on... There's two planets? I'm confused on that one a little bit there, Jennifer. Because if her ascendant's Leo, then Jupiter would not be conjunct her ascendant because it's in... But maybe Jupiter is conjunct her natal ascendant. Is that what I'm trying to understand? Okay. And then she's having a hard time with keeping anything down and is due February 1st. Oh my goodness. The good news, Jennifer, is she's due on the date of the Venus-Neptune North Node conjunction. And that's a really beautiful aspect. That child will be a very idealistic baby with that chart. So I hope everything goes well. And yeah, having Mars on your ascendant can lead to some discomfort within the body. Absolutely, for sure. So just sending you and your daughter good vibes. Lauren says, in Vedic, Pushya Nakshatra 3.2 degrees to 16.4 degrees is a place where governments are seen to wage wars against their own citizens. Giving enforcement authorities essential martial law. Mars will be just outside that degree point, February 24th. Oh. And Jennifer is yes, confirming Jupiter's on the natal ascendant. Okay, good. That's interesting, Lauren. Would not surprise me. We have already seen in South Korea. Martial law was already declared in a democratic society, and that, I believe, that president is about to be impeached, and there was pushback from the citizens. That type of weaponization of a military against its own citizens would not surprise me in a country like America or in other, you know, civilized countries that have fallen under the thumb of an oppressive government. So I hope that that doesn't happen, but that's a good catch, and that I could see it. Mars is in Leo. Leo is the centralized power. Aquarius is often associated with the masses, with those that are not in power. And Mars opposing a civilization of citizens, Mars is military, right? So this is definitely a possibility. Oh, yeah, especially something with out of bounds. Yeah, Lauren says. Yes, that is a great point. Mars out of bounds could be like overutilizing a martial force, or utilizing a martial force in a way that is outside the norm, something like martial law. Now, that being said, let's try to take these things as they come. It's good to be aware of them. It's good to be aware of them. What I don't want to do today is I don't want to devolve into like so much fear that we just can't function. I mean, this is how we exhaust ourselves, because we are, friends, there's a lot of challenges coming down the pike, and not just from a political transition. There's so many challenges that we have to deal with as a globe right now, including a warming planet, and including having to deal with being able to feed, house, and bring energy to a much greater population than the planet probably was able to sustain, and the challenges of being able to sustain habitable conditions for a very large amount of people, animals, plants, ecosystems, etc. So those challenges alone are going to be something that really tax our nervous systems. But I will say this, the solutions are ones of reciprocity. And I think that when we work together and share with one another and assume positive intent from one another, that to me can lead to much better outcomes. It also means we shouldn't deny abuses of power when we see it, and we shouldn't stick our head in the sand and pretend everything's okay when it's not, especially for the vulnerable people in our lives. Oftentimes human beings don't respond and take action until something is negative affecting them personally. I would encourage you to avoid that pitfall, especially when your neighbors are going to be more and more in jeopardy. And if your neighbors are in jeopardy, that means you're in jeopardy, because we need each other. We need everyone. Okay? So to me, that's the solution. But I do think that these are really good things to point out as far as the wide spectrum of possibilities. I'm not predicting that is exactly what will happen, but we're already just acknowledging things that have already happened. And then we're trying to think about, well, where's the peak of this energy? Where might this start to alleviate? Where's the steam valve for all this? So these are good reflections. Rachel's here, says, hello, Spencer. Nice to quietly tune in on a dark December evening. Energy is a little low, but happy to contemplate the themes of January with your guidance. I hope everyone's doing well. I hope you're doing well, Rachel. We're talking some Aquarian themes today, especially with the Mars opposition with Pluto. We're talking about some of the difficulties we may be facing, but also some of the ways to maintain our health and sanity and sense of purpose over the course of these next few weeks. And energy is kind of low at the day before the winter solstice as I'm recording this, but hang in there. The light returns very shortly. Like within 24 hours, we see the return of the light and maybe a renewed sense of purpose. So thank you so much for joining me again, Rachel. I hope everything's going well over there for you in Ireland. All right, so let's move forward. I think we've talked about Mars and Cancer and the square. So we've talked about that first quarter moon, right? I think we've analyzed that to a decent amount. Now we get to the 8th, and here we see on the 8th, this is when Mercury is moving into Capricorn. So Mercury is going to be moving into or out of its exile. So this is an improvement on the Hellenistic dignity of Mercury, which means that Mercury is going to be in a place that is less swimming upstream. It doesn't mean it's perfect. It's still joining the house of a malefic planet, Saturn, which sometimes can be challenging for any planet. But I do think it is going to be moving into a harmonious relationship with its host, Saturn. You can see this here. So here we have Mercury. Oops. Here's Mercury in Capricorn. And here is its host, Saturn. And now it's a sextile relationship. So the resources that Saturn is providing are much easier to attain than the opposition that Mercury had with its host, Jupiter, a retrograde Jupiter in Gemini, a place that it's not comfortable. And yes, we had the mutual reception between Mercury and Jupiter, but I do think that it was a difficult relationship. And now we have Mercury in a place that is more practical, more grounded, less about firing off passionate beliefs, more about saying, well, what do we do about it, right? What do we do about the challenges that we're experiencing, and discussing the pros and cons of doing so. Now, this is not just Mercury moving into Capricorn. Once Mercury moves into Capricorn, there's a really interesting thing that comes to the fore here, and that is Mercury at the bending of the nodes. So this is really interesting. So this Capricorn ingress is going to be pretty important. We have Mercury squaring the nodes of the moon at 0 degrees of Capricorn. It's squaring the north node in Aries and the south node in Libra, both at 0 degrees of those respective signs. And when a planet is at the bending of the nodes, it's in a place where we're at a turning point. We're moving away from relationship, harmony, etc., equality, and we're moving towards self-interest with the North Node in Aries. Although, I will say this, the North Node's not going to be in Aries for much longer. So, it'll be moving more towards the Pisces North Node. So that's an interesting little adjustment that we might have to make. But I do think that there will be a lot of questions about where we're going, what the most practical thing is to do. I do think that this could potentially also augur an increase in some rhetoric around fighting versus peacemaking. So to keep that in mind as we see Mercury moving to the squaring of the nodes here. This is a really charged period in history. And it is one where stability and it's time for things to change. I will say that. Now, how they're changing is up for debate. But we can't sustain things the way that they've been going. And again, I'm just an astrologer on YouTube, so I don't have all the answers. I try to reflect philosophically about what would benefit the most amount of people, but people are going to agree and disagree about what that looks like. But I do think having the conversation about the changes that we need to make to our material structures will be an important part of Mercury's ingress into Capricorn when it squares the nodes. All right, so that is the first decan. And what we're going to do now, I'm going to check in with our chat. And we got some new people stopping in. Tracy's here. Says, hi, Spencer. I've been missing so many of these wonderful recordings, been out of the loop due to many difficulties, and good to hear what you are saying. Can feel the buildup for sure over here in the UK. Yeah, Tracy. I've had some clients from the UK recently, and just definitely feeling some of their struggles as well. This is not just an American challenge. This is a global challenge we're experiencing. These aspects, while they may interact with a potential, with one particular country's natal chart or something like that, I do think that, well, I don't think, I know that these aspects affect us globally because these are things that we can all observe no matter where we're at within the world. So hang in there, Tracy, and I hope you're navigating it gracefully. Cosmic Girl 101 is here. Says, hey buddies from Australia. Now Cosmic Girl might be experiencing these things slightly differently in the southern hemisphere. I've always been real curious about northern versus southern hemisphere astrology and experiences of that, especially with the differences in the seasons. So you'll have to give us the 411 on that, the info on that, Cosmic Girl, how you're doing at the summer solstice in Australia. Jolie James says, I was thinking about the nodal shift and wondering if the collective will move in more of a spiritual direction with the North Node in Pisces. Well, one would only hope. But I will say this, the first thought that comes to mind with that, I mean, I would love for us to move in a more meaningful, spiritual, less materialistic direction. But my only caveat with that, Jolie, is there is a real danger in the next few months ahead for powers that be to start moving more towards a theocracy. A theocracy is where the religious institutions control the government. And to me, in my worldview, I don't like that. Like I like the American separation of church and state, and because it allows for people to worship in the way that suits them, not in a way that is state sanctioned. And that to me is a value that I think is one of the potential very beautiful values about America, the idealistic values of America. And having to make a state-funded religion or a state-pushed religion could actually also be part of the Pisces North Node shift, where we're increasing the religious consciousness. And again, it could be very good. It could be very good. The Pisces North Node could be very good as far as increasing compassion, increasing our awareness of things that we can't see, which is that is the foundation of faith, right? Of faith in general, being able to believe in something that we can't necessarily see. But I do think there is a danger of an increase of control through spirituality. And that's what I have my eyes squinting at, skeptically, right? That's so balance between those two things. KP says, hi Spencer, what's up KP? Joining late but finally glad to catch it live. Nice. KP is joining us from Cleveland. Cleveland rocks, Cleveland, Ohio. Yeah, it's good to see you, KP. It's been a little while, and that's okay, friends. You know, you're all still welcome here. Like, you don't have to, I really appreciate all the consistent people who come, but it's a weird time in the afternoon. Sometimes life interferes, and it's nice to see you when you can come in and catch the live. So just really glad you're here, and we still feel you in spirit, even if you're not catching it live. Yeah, and here's the other thing, friends. If you can't catch it live, and I always love seeing the comments after the fact too. Like I try to respond to every comment I can, and it's really just nice to see you, and that you're still part of our energy here. So nice to see you, KP. Cosmic Girl says, I predict with the South Node in Virgo, there may be a 4-day work week, and animal advocacy is a big theme. These topics louder. You know what? I would support that. I think the 4-day work week would be great. I think we're pushing ourselves pretty hard in late stage capitalism. And you know me, I'm a big animal lover and advocate for treating animals with respect and with like just as the beautiful conscious beings that they are. So I hope you're right. I hope that is something that will increase, is the ability to have a more fair and just work week and a more fair and just relationship with these beautiful creatures that we share this amazing blue globe with. KP says, I always listen to the replays, rest assured. Oh, nice. Well, appreciate you, friend. All right. So, friends, do me a huge favor. Whether you're new or returning, loyal participant, please like this video if you can. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Turn on that notification bell. I would love it too if you aren't on the email list. There's a link in the description of this video or wherever you're listening to the podcast to sign up for the newsletter. That's a great way to stay in touch with classes that are happening, new live streams. I've started giving kind of a heads up as when we're going live. I think hopefully that's helping to know when I'm going live. So, because I'll send an email out around Wednesday or so, one email a week. But I'm also starting one to remind you when we're going live. So that's where you can really kind of engage with all that content. There's also sales on webinars and on Third Coast Mojo material from Tanya. So do me a favor, sign up for that if you can. And I hope that you all stretched in the stretch break between Capricorn 2 and now Capricorn 3. I'm just happy to be spending some time with y'all on this Friday afternoon talking about January 2025. Corinne is here. What's up, Candy Corn? Hello, I hope I'm not too late. You are not too late, Corinne. Whenever you guys stop in is exactly where and when you're supposed to be. But nice to see you, friend, and just been another person I've been able to connect with recently and just appreciate you and hope that you're doing well. All right, so let's take a look at Capricorn 3. So the sun in Capricorn 3 is a time frame between January 9th and January the 19th. So usually about 10 days for a decan. And here we see someone holding on to 4 pentacles, and the tarot card associated with this, the 4 of Pentacles. This is a decan that is solar ruled, so it's a solar face in a Saturnian sign, and the sun is often about administrating power, right? It's often about how we necessarily take on responsibilities, how we delegate responsibilities, how we administrate the material resources in our lives. So themes of administrative powers, it's related to CEOs, kings, thrones, etc. We just had Pluto moving through this decan. So we've seen the corruption that has come through massive wealth consolidation by CEOs, kings, and thrones of power. You think about the consolidation of wealth in the tech industry as well. Now we're seeing some of the focus shift in the control of information, but often that has come from massive consolidations of wealth with things like Amazon, Twitter, etc. United Health, all those consolidations of wealth. In this decan, we might be feeling the weight of responsibility. Now, this isn't necessary. No decan is inherently good or bad. Okay, I just want to throw that out there. There are people that traverse this 10-degree section of Capricorn and administrate power in a just and responsible way in service of their communities, etc. But we also want to talk about the negative sides of these things to watch out for. Now, in this card, it gives us a warning. You see someone who is holding on very tightly to a pentacle, aka money. And this can be about gathering wealth or hoarding wealth. This decan is related to Hesed in the Kabbalistic tree of life. And Hesed is a sephira, or the closest comparison I could have to him is like a chakra center, an energy center, spiritual center on this tree that is related to Jupiter. So there is an abundance or even an overabundance of the quality that we see when we're relating to fours in the tarot. Here, we may have an overabundance or an abundance of material resources or wealth. And this card is telling us that that might be a challenge. I like the story of King Midas with this decan. The story of someone who wished that everything that they touched turned to gold. But after they had their material needs met, they realized that that touch extended to their loved ones and turned them to gold and created more isolation rather than the support that they needed. To me, that is a lesson in only taking what you need. I agree that there are times when we need to focus on our material structures, support systems, making money, making resources, having everything we need physically. Now, this is coming from someone who rejected a lot of that as a young person, but has learned some tough lessons from the pursuit of, or the lack of pursuit of, material security. There are situations in life where material security is very important. Everyone deserves a foundation of material security, in my opinion. But there comes a point of diminishing returns. And I think this Capricorn 3 could be the point of diminishing returns. And that King Midas story teaches us that. Is that once you've got all your physical needs met, you keep touching things. You start touching things that are not based on how much wealth that you can create from them. And it separates you from true wealth sometimes, which are our relationships. I've been someone who has passed up a lot of opportunities in their life for advancement. Not every opportunity. I've achieved some interesting things, but there's been a lot of choices that I've made in service of choosing my family and my friends over ambition. And I have very little regret in that, because I'm someone who, I'm not going to climb the mountain and get to the peak and be alone. There's no fun in that. And that's something that I think is really important to reflect on when the sun's in Capricorn 3 is, how much is enough? Are you hoarding more than your share? Are you needing to administrate more effectively in your life? What responsibilities are you willing to take on to administrate in your life to create material security? Have you taken on too many responsibilities? One thing I know about the Capricorn 3 types in my life is they are very dependable for the most part. Maybe not in every part of their life, but there's one part of their life where they're going to show up and they're going to endure, right? They're going to try to do more. Like, that just period, end of sentence. And I think that to effectively administrate, you need to be in service of the people that you are leading, and not in the service of the bottom line or of profit. This is something that we're finding out at the end of days with Pluto and Capricorn, and some of the challenges that we saw in the news in the last few weeks is people are upset because the CEO, the Capricorn 3 archetype, was not acting in service of the people that they were leading. He was acting in service of the shareholders and of the bottom line, the profit, to the very real detriment of the people he was supposedly responsible for. And that had negative consequences. And again, we can argue or decry the methods for creating change within that. But what it did is it highlighted a much greater problem. And that is one of a person in a position of power not necessarily working in the best interests of the people that he was charged with being responsible for. So how can you manage your power with grace? There's a real interesting lesson within this too. And again, I'm not an advocate for violence to create change. I want to be very clear about that. I hope for peaceful change methods. But violence is a part of life. And sometimes when we push things to their extremes, that becomes more of a possibility. So one of the things about this decan is if you hoard responsibility, you hoard resources, you hoard power, and you ascend to whatever the top of the mountain is, you have to come down. You know, if you get to the top of the mountain or the top of the wheel of fortune, there's an inevitable twist and turn of fate. That's why I'm a firm believer in the middle path. I think that you ascend too far to a height through questionable means, that will activate forces to knock you down a peg or to take that power away from you. That's something to consider. Every time you make a choice to hurt others in pursuit of your own selfish ambitions, you are seeding the seed of your own demise. It's a golden rule. If we don't want to talk about King Midas, what's the real golden rule? Treat others the way that you want to be treated. And these are going to be important reflections in Capricorn 3. How can you maintain your ethics while you're still trying to create a positive material structure and foundation so that you can thrive? Here's what nature teaches us. Reciprocal relationships and sharing are the ultimate way to sustain over the long haul. People and animals or whatever that hoard, indigenous cultures teach us that hoarding is a Wendigo mindset. And the Wendigo mindset is a hungry, addictive beast that takes more than their share. They literally created a mythological demon, or they told that story to teach people that taking more than their share endangered the entire group, the entire tribe, the entire organization. So how can we keep something healthy by having this reciprocal relationship rather than burning something out, like burning out the goose that lays the golden eggs? How do you keep the goose healthy? You know, sharing. So how can you manage your power with grace? Are you hoarding resources or allowing them to flow through you through sharing? Do you own your possessions or do they own you? This is a question that we should ask ourselves as we get further and further into ethical ambiguities to try to feed our families, etc. How much is enough? And then finally, is this throne a palace or a prison? Sometimes we ascend to positions of power that we're not ready for, that aren't what we thought they would be. And that can be very disillusioning and disheartening. And I think that one question that I often ask myself is, there are two ways to, I think, and this is not the only thing, but to me there are two approaches to creating, to releasing anxiety about money. The first one is go out and make a ton of it so that you don't have to worry about it. Now, that's easier said than done. That can lead to hoarding, that can lead to unethical practices, not in every situation, but in some situations. The other approach to releasing anxiety about money, lower your overhead. You know, if you have less expensive things that you are tied to and in debt to, you have more freedom. You know, making choices about downsizing. If you have a giant house you can't afford, downsizing to a more affordable situation may release some stress in your life. If you have a 10-year-old car that still runs and runs good, maybe you don't need that brand new car that puts you into debt or increases your payment if that other car was paid off. These are choices that you can make in service of material security that aren't just pursuing more. Sometimes it's through cutting back that can lead to the actual peaceful feeling. And this isn't always a popular thought. A lot of times we have a very aspirational quality when we have influencers, etc., where they're saying, look at how great life can be. And I know that my view sometimes isn't the most popular as far as saying, well, how about we be happier with less, like, because I think that on some level that is a difficult sell when you see people who are hoarding so much. And then they're like, well, we've been happy with less for a long time. And now we've being asked to be happy with even less and even less. And I get it. And I'm a believer in the redistribution of wealth. But there are certain choices that we can make where we don't necessarily need to keep up with the Joneses, I guess I will say. And that can lead to its own sense of peace. Virginia is here. What's up? Virginia Davis says, hi, Rachel. I'm in Lynchburg. I used to live in Roanoke and really miss it. Oh, nice. We're having some connections with people in Virginia. Hope you're doing well, Virginia, and that you are doing well. Nice to see a new face in the chat. Lauren says, when understanding the decans, I try to look at the ruling planet in that decan for kind of the strongest representation of it. Saturn was in this decan April of 2019 to March of 2020. I'm sure we can all think of some situations during this time that will resonate with this energy. Yeah. So if you remember that period of time, that was right before the pandemic hit, and maybe during the pandemic. Maybe Saturn was in this decan during the beginning of the pandemic. Think about people hoarding toilet paper and just like going off and like having an entire attic full of toilet paper. Did they really need that in the moment? Probably not. They hoarded out of fear. They hoarded out of not necessarily giving a rat's ass about their fellow human being. And honestly, that kind of behavior can lead to a usurping of power. So we just have to be very careful, like taking only what we need. You need to get what you need. I'm not saying you should sacrifice to the point where you're not getting your needs met, but there is a point of diminishing returns. Everyone has seen those representations of wealth through rice, and where they're like, here's the normal person. They have half a grain of rice. Here's the millionaires. They have a handful of rice. And here's the billionaires. They have like a room full of rice. Nobody should have a room full of rice in relationship to wealth and equality. All right. Cosmic Girl says, this card reminds me of tax evasion. Well, I mean, that's really what we're kind of seeing. We're seeing the oligarch class trying to further evade paying their fair share to help society. I mean, I'm just going to be real blunt about the way I see things. And you can take or leave this opinion, I guess. But the way I see things, most of the challenges that we experience today, most of them, not everyone, but most of them can be boiled down to one thing. People taking more than their share. Like wealthy oligarchs trying to consolidate wealth. Most of the other culture wars that they've tried to distract us through are to distract from the giant wealth grabs and tax evasions, all of those things. It's just a big distraction. Don't fall for it, okay? Like, hold people's feet to the fire when it comes to that. Hopefully through building community, all right? To me, that's how we get through this, is our communities are stronger than their wealth grabs, hopefully. You see this with people that are like unionizing or striking. You have Amazon workers striking right now saying, hey, we've put up with these conditions long enough and you need us, right? You need us. You've exploited our labor. You need our labor. Well, we have our boundaries and our limits. To me, this is the masses as a community. We have to have boundaries too and say, where are our boundaries? This is a Capricorn kind of thing. Where is the line where we say we will not be abused and exploited? Where is that line for you? It's going to be different for individuals, but as a community, I think the line's being pushed to the point where we're saying, you know what? You all have been crossing this line. You've been habitual line steppers, and yet you still try to grab more and more and more to all of our detriments. And it's not healthy. Okay, let's talk about some of this astrology. We'll bring the chart back up here. And again, I don't have all the answers. I have my own blind spots, ignorances. I have a certain amount of privilege that I try not to take it for granted. And I think that we do still need to try to speak up, even if we feel scared or even if we feel oppressed or something of that nature. I try to strike a healthy balance between speaking up for those that don't have a voice and self-preservation at some point too, because when you start speaking up, sometimes you'll awaken opposing forces, and that can be stressful on its own too. But I do think that we need to be balanced about how we view some of these things. Taria T says, I always like the way you speak. Thank you for the content you're creating and sharing. It's 11 p.m. in Finland. Oh, Taria, thank you for staying up with us. Good night. I continue with the recording tomorrow. Thank you, Taria. Thank you all my Finnish friends for staying up late with me. Appreciate you, and keep doing the good work. We'll keep trying to figure out a global solution for these challenges that is fair, that allows everyone to have a peaceful and healthy and joyful life, right? That's the end goal of this, right? The joyful, peaceful life. And yes, we may have to go through some bumpy patches to get there, but that's what is inspiring. Maybe even some of this fire today is the desire for just a world that is just and a world that is fair and that where everybody gets what they need rather than just a tiny handful of people. Jennifer says, Dad's a Cap sun, and this resonates. It's always fun when we can see the themes playing out in the people that we care about, Jennifer. It tells us that there's something to this, doesn't it? All right, friends, let's keep rolling along. What do you say? Let's keep rolling along. So on the 9th, we have the moon and Mercury moving out of bounds. So this is an interesting day. This is coming right off of Mercury moving into Capricorn and squaring the nodes. So this is a point where we're at a crossroads. And right after that crossroads, both the moon and Mercury are not following the rules anymore. So the moon will be out of bounds from January 9th to January the 14th. Mercury will be out of bounds from January 9th to January the 20th. So keep in mind that we may have ideas that are outside the box. We may have communications. We may say things that we wouldn't normally say. Also, Mars is going to be out of bounds too. So moon, Mercury, and Mars all out of bounds at the same time. We may be feeling differently. We may be communicating differently. We may be engaging in conflict differently. I feel like Mars out of bounds is making its presence known here today. I try to be judicious about calling things out. And today, just, I don't know. I want to be as authentic as I can on the channel, and I want to be able to take in as many viewpoints and whatnot, but I really do think that being able to speak towards equality shouldn't be that controversial, right? I'm sometimes amazed at where we've come to as a collective, where speaking out about just people having enough to eat and things like that is seen as being a rabble rouser. Like, come on, why can't we just fall back to common sense? All right, so moon and Mercury out of bounds January 9th through the 14th for the moon and through the 20th for Mercury. And then we get to our north node moving into Pisces on the 11th. So here is the day that will happen. We're going to see this later in the day on January the 11th, 7 or 8 p.m. around my local time. So I think we've talked about this a little bit, and I think that we've covered some ground with this. But again, the way that the Hellenistic astrologers would look at the nodes is a little bit different to the way that the modern evolutionary astrologers would look at the nodes. Modern evolutionary astrology is a product of modern Western civilization. And in modern Western civilization, gain is what is exalted. increase is that which is encouraged. In some Eastern civilizations, where we might experience things like the Eastern astrology Jyotish, being able to release ourselves from attachment is what is exalted. Being able to ascend to a spiritual consciousness and release our attachments to the physical world is a higher ideal. Now, I tend to be someone who thinks that both are valid, right? I think that we need some material security. We need some spiritual consciousness. We need to build and we need to release. And the Hellenistic way of thinking about it to me is the way that I think resonates the most for me. I think that the Hellenistic astrologers thought of the North Node as a point of increase. In Jyotish, they thought of the North Node as a hungry demon that had consumed the elixir of life and then had his head severed, but he stayed alive because he had already consumed some of that elixir of immortality. So they look at that as a point where we can never get our needs satisfied. We always want more. The South Node, in contrast, would be the body that is processing things. Think of this as the great recycler. In Hellenistic astrology, the South Node is associated with decrease, things that are leaving the physical plane. Because in Western civilization, we just can't handle death and decrease, the evolutionary astrologers think of this as something we need to move away from. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that sometimes the South Node will bring us healthy releases. If you think about this from a benefic, malefic type of experience, having a benefic planet on the North Node could increase good fortune, but having a malefic planet on the South Node could decrease bad fortune. So it is all a matter of perspective. And sometimes to release something, we need to let go and acknowledge that we can't hang on to this. Things get backed up and get toxic when we hang on too much, right? When we hang on too much. I'm going through this right now. I went on a little bit of a, book spree. I'm fortunate enough to have some disposable income to purchase books, and I did. And now my office is just like, I don't have enough shelves for the books that I have, and it is becoming a toxic situation in my living space. One thing that I hang on to, the thing that I hang on to is knowledge. I can't release knowledge. I can't let go of a book. Like, to me, the knowledge is so sacred that I just want to create my own personal library of Alexandria in my house. Whether you agree with that or not, that's something that I struggle with. So for all the books that I buy, I never get rid of a book. And it is now created almost an untenable situation in one corner of my office. That's an example of something that I'm attached to. Now, your mileage may vary with this. You may be attached to clothes. Maybe there's something in your past where you could never get rid of a piece of clothing. Whatever trauma in your life. Maybe it's food. Maybe you had food insecurity growing up and you could never throw out some food because you're like, well, maybe I'll eat it, even if it's expired. But then it becomes toxic the more we hang on to it. And I think that this is teaching us with the North Node, South Node, what are we hanging on to? We may desire, let's look at it from multiple perspectives. With the North Node in Pisces, let's look at from the evolutionary perspective would say you are moving towards spirituality and you're moving towards faith and moving towards compassion, etc. All good things, okay? The Jyotish experience would say you are hungering and desiring a spiritual experience, maybe to the point of never being satisfied. I think it's a hunger for meaning. Like Pisces to me is about meaning that we can't see all the time. It's an internal journey. The Hellenistic perspective would say there's an increase in a desire to maybe escape from reality, like an increase of escapism or an increase of compassion. Could look at it multiple different ways. You know, if you have a negative planet, like say you have Mercury in Pisces on the North Node, that's an increase of a very debilitated planet. That could be the increase of the challenges. Like there's, sometimes I've seen some charts with people who were, had really difficulty communicating with Mercury in Pisces, like mute. Like I think Maya Angelou is a good example. Like in her youth, she couldn't talk, or she refused to talk. And if it was on the North Node, it would increase the difficulty communicating. Eventually, she turned that into a passion for writing, passion for poetry, passion for metaphorically communicating. The Piscean way of communicating is through story, through myth, through seeing something as something else that isn't there. That's what a myth is. That's what a symbol is. It's saying, here is one manifestation of this, and it is representing something completely different. Okay? Literalness says this is a mug, and it means this holds water. Like, but if we look at it figuratively, we say this is a mug, and it holds truth or whatever it is. It's a vehicle for, I don't know. I'm not doing good at doing a metaphor here, but it is a container for everything that is meaningful to me, or something like that. Or you could say this is a pen, and we use it for writing. Or you could say this is a rocket ship. This is helping us explore our dreams through the magic of metaphor and writing. Okay, it's exploring space through being able to communicate symbols, etc. Okay, so increase in the Jupiterian faith, but also martyrdom, like the desire to sacrifice for a greater good, a greater cause. So then what do we see with Virgo? The South Node in Virgo. Virgo is a sign that is separating things into categories and identifying flaws so that we can, and assigning something value, right? Assigning a value, whether it's sustainable through the winter or whether it needs to be discarded. So I do think that we could see a dissolving of boundaries, a movement away from categorization with the South Node in Virgo, a movement away from legacies. I think the one manifestation I feel pretty strongly about is laws that might change how income or how wealth is passed from one generation to the next, because we have a South Node decreasing this transfer type of thing. I think that we may stop seeing and focusing on the things that make us different, and have an increase in the awareness of that which makes us similar. Essence. An increase in a desire to see the essence of things rather than its differentiating forms. Now, that's not always good, though. Like, sometimes we do need to differentiate things. If we just mash everything together in all situations, that can lead to really some dark stuff. Like to be able to, and one of the things is a religious crusade. If we just try to force everyone into one specific worldview or spiritual worldview, that over the course of history has led to all sorts of atrocities. One being the Spanish Inquisition. You know, if you didn't believe a certain way, you were suffering. or dead. So being able to homogenize everything is not necessarily positive. Forcing people to believe in something that dissolves all of their differences can be negative. So how do we find the balance point between both of these things? How do we allow for universal compassion and essence, but still appreciate the different forms that takes? That to me is how we navigate this gracefully. You know, we get so fixated on form. We get so fixated on what we see that we ignore the animating force around it. But sometimes, again, there are definitely times in the past where we have said, well, we don't agree with this form, so we're going to completely annihilate that form in service of what we believe. And that is real dangerous. That's real dangerous. So those are my thoughts on the North and South Node, Pisces, Virgo. I hope that we're able to navigate it gracefully. One thing I can recommend with this North Node, South Node type of experience, leave some space for the universe's plan to be different than the plans that you're making. I think it requires flexibility. It requires going with the flow and the current of your life. If you are trying to stick to an established method to get to your chosen meaningful goal, you will suffer because you will be trying to swim upstream. Be flexible with the method, right? South Node and Virgo, and allow what you're trying to achieve spiritually, meaningfully, to find whatever new pathway, like water finds a new pathway around obstacles naturally. Let it be natural. And recognize that we don't always have the best idea about how to get from point A to point B. Well, what I do know is that when you keep your values in mind, the form can change. You keep your essence and your values in mind, the form is mutable. And that's something we learn in Virgo too, is form changes. Things decay. You try to keep something from decaying, well, that's sometimes a very, very much a fool's errand. You accept aging, you'll start to age gracefully. Okay? All right. Tracy says, agree, speaking out over here has a vibration around it that is proving challenging. I believe this is in the UK. That is unseen. I feel that as Saturn and Pisces that you're talking about, possibility. Yeah, there is some challenging things about speaking out. And hopefully the conversation we're having today will land appropriately, and we'll get to continue to have these deep, meaningful conversations with each other. Lauren says, I like when you're passionate, Spencer. If you're feeling like a renegade, it's only because the collective energy is so out of alignment with these basic principles of life, liberty, and justice. Yeah, it's kind of crazy to me, Lauren, that these are radical ideas of compassion, caring, kindness, sharing. This makes me a radical rebel. It's so ass backwards. Those should be the things that are just, not taken for granted, but the foundation. So yeah, if being kind and wanting to advocate for sharing and balance makes me a renegade, let's go for it. Lauren says that Virgo is kind of the analytical mind and Pisces the imaginary, extrasensory, and unseen. We're going to have to find a lot of balance here, as Pisces energies tend to want to take us out of our body there in Virgo. The Pisces people I know have a lot of earthing, fresh air, and grounding to their energies. They are amazing manifestors. Yeah. And my dad's a Pisces. My mom was a Pisces moon. They're visionary people. But we all need balance. Every one of us listening here today is manifested in a physical body. Whether we believe that it's animated by an eternal soul or not, we have to take care of that body. And we have to understand some of the very real physical laws that govern our movement through time and space. That being said, there are certain metaphysical laws that may be different than what we understand rationally. And I think one of those is that the theory of quantum physics is really interesting to me. One where we're seeing matter snapping in and out of existence and due to someone's attention. Like that to me that really fascinated me back in I don't know if this is the early 2000s. They had stuff about like what the bleep do we know and The Secret, although The Secret commodified it. I'm not a fan of that particular approach. But the what the bleep do we know folks it was interesting. Like it was talking a lot about quantum physics. And I do think that there is some truth to what we put our attention towards, what we dream is the first step to manifestation. And sometimes a physical manifestation can lead to a new dream. It's all circular. KP says, my North Node is in Pisces. I'll be having a nodal return in 2025. It should be interesting. Well, my advice, KP, go with the flow. This is perfect. The hexagram, I'm not going to spoil the hexagram, but the hexagram speaks to this, is releasing expectations. Oftentimes, the Virgo people in my life, myself included, I have an expectation about how I want things to go. And the most pain I experience in my life is when the plan changes, So I think going with the flow and allowing for space for the plan to change while still maintaining your sight on where you want to go based on your ethics, based on your higher consciousness will be important. Corinne says, I wonder if K2 in Virgo will be a good time to improve gut health. Ooh, yeah, absolutely. I think, absolutely, Corinne, releasing things that could be challenging to that. There could be realizations. I know for me, I had one of those epiphanies, not with the South Node in Virgo, but I had an epiphany at the Jupiter, I think it was a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus. And I discovered that I'm allergic to fructan, which is a sugar that you see in different vegetables and wheat products and different things. And I thought I had a gluten sensitivity, and it was a fructan sensitivity. And when I eliminated the fructan from my life, my whole digestion completely shifted. And I got this little enzyme that helps me digest it. My life really improved. So this is just a little practical aside, but yeah, I think that could be a manifestation too. Lauren says, I love that. Kombucha tea is an amazing blood purifier, and the 12 cell salts for cellular support and reconstruction. A lot of live foods. Yes, absolutely. I like fermented foods. Good for you. Cosmic Girl has natal Jupiter and Venus conjunct in Pisces in the 12th. Oh my goodness. So this will be an interesting year for you. Rachel Fletcher says, talking to Virginia. Oh, nice. So we've had some conversations between people in the group connecting in their local areas. We're just building bridges, folks. We're building bridges. All right, let's keep going. So on the 12th day of January, Mars will trine Neptune. And so here we have Mars at about 27 degrees of Cancer. And I may have to start speeding through some of these a little bit more. I got a birthday to celebrate with my partner. It's my partner's birthday, friends. Tanya deserves a good birthday celebration, so we won't try to spend all afternoon working. So Mars-Neptune. Mars-Neptune, it's a trine. So I think that the first thing to think about with Mars-Neptune is that Mars-Neptune squares can be a lot more difficult. And Suzanne, we're going to lose Susanna in Finland here. Says, I'm sleepy. Calling it a day. Thank you for your deep insights about Capricorn season. As a double Capricorn, I appreciate it. Happy solstice, everyone. Happy birthday to Tanya. Thank you, Susanna. Have a good evening, and thank you for hanging in as long as you did. I know that this is a late experience for my Scandinavian friends, but thinking about you and hope you have a wonderful solstice. So Mars trine Neptune, retrograde trine Neptune. First of all, trines, easier flowing aspect between the two planets. The difficult parts about it, well, Mars, we've already broken down Mars's condition, retrograde, in its fall in Cancer. Its contact with Neptune, I find that Neptune is a planet that dissolves things. It has been sort of syncretized with Pisces in the past. Even I feel mistaken as a planetary ruler of Pisces. Your mileage may vary with that. I think that there is some similarities in its action to the Piscean need to dissolve boundaries. So if we can agree that Neptune is a solvent of sorts, what is it? Whatever it contacts can end up dissolving. like, so to me, the way that I would interpret like a Mars-Neptune trine is that we may be dissolving some of our anger. We may be dissolving some of our conflicts. We may be dissolving some of our will to keep fighting. And maybe that leads to a more accepted type of experience or accepting type of experience. So I do think that this could be something where we might feel tired, but it might be a good kind of tired where we're just stopping the fight. We're saying, you know what, I don't want to fight about this anymore. Let's dissolve the enmities between us. Let's dissolve what separates us. So that's another manifestation. You could be taking actions towards merging with someone else or something concept, some spiritual identity potentially. All right. Hey, Simon is here. What's up, Simon? Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly. It says, I have Sun in Aquarius, Sun Cancer, Ascendant Gemini. That is really complicated. Moon in Cancer. Oh my goodness, Simon. That is a big stack up, right? So first of all, let me wish you an early birthday with the Sun moving into Aquarius in the month ahead. And yeah, that sounds like it could be a challenging set of things that's pulling you in a lot of different directions, friends. So hopefully the guidance that we're giving today has been helpful. But thank you so much for stopping in the chat. It's kind of I feel like you might have been here before, but if you haven't, welcome. Okay. So let's move forward. And on the 13th, we have the Sun making a trine with Uranus. So here is the Sun at about 23 to 24 degrees of Capricorn. We'll go back a few hours here so you can see it in the chart. And it's going to be making a trine with Uranus. Now, this is in conjunction, the Sun-Uranus trine, with our full moon in Cancer. So let's do this. Let's talk about these aspects together. And we're going to do that in the context of the full moon. Because none of these things happen in a vacuum. They're all happening simultaneously, and it's really nice to be able to kind of see the symphony of planets interacting with one another. Okay? So here's our full moon at 23 degrees of Cancer, January the 13th, which is a Monday. And so it's the full moon on Monday. So Duran Duran doesn't have a song about the full moon, but you get the idea. The moon's going to be making an application to that retrograde Mars in Cancer, just coming and starting to separate from its trine to Neptune. So that's part of this full moon, the Mars-Neptune trine. Mercury is co-present with the Sun, and we have that beautiful trine from the Sun to Uranus. So, what are some of the themes we could expect? Now, first of all, I'm going to go quicker through this, but I am going to do, hopefully, a full live stream on the full moon in Cancer. So keep your eyes peeled for that, probably around the first or second week of January. So we've talked about the themes in Capricorn 3, administration of power, potentially hoarding wealth, desire for more, the need to delegate, the need to say enough is enough. Now, Cancer 3 is interesting because Cancer 3 is very different than the throned figure holding on very tightly to their material resources. The figure in Cancer 3 is someone sitting under like the Bodhi tree with arms crossed refusing the extra cup from the hand of the divine. He has 3 cups already sitting in front of him, and he's refusing more. He's like, I've had enough. I'm satisfied. I've had enough. I'm not gonna take anymore. And this might be too many emotions. So this is sort of a decan where we say we've had enough feelings, and now we need to kind of figure out what to do with them. Whereas we may feel in Capricorn 3, like here's the card for Cancer 3, right? 4 of Cups. We may feel in Capricorn 3 we have enough things, and we need to get rid of some stuff. We need to stop pursuing more wealth. And we can see that transition from Capricorn to Aquarius, going off into the fringe, making do with less, making do with resources, quote unquote, of lesser value, recycling things that people have discarded. We'll talk about that in a second. But this full moon, it's colored by Mars, and it has a very boundary breaking Sun-Uranus trine. So I think that there could be some really interesting ideas that come to us, maybe even about our identities as leaders, or the identity of our leaders, that could start breaking things up, breaking up some of the ruts that we're in, atoning for past mistakes potentially. But I don't think it's going to be quiet. I think that the contact with the moon and Mars shakes things up. It's disruptive. This decan of Cancer has themes related to surplus versus scarcity, but also luxurious tastes, right? But you can see when offered more, he's refusing. So we might have a challenge of administrative power in conflict with people who maybe are hungry, maybe who are trying to feed their families. This is a real big theme in America and around the world right now, as people feel like their food is becoming more expensive and they're having difficulty finding enough resources to feed their family. Some people are. The more fortunate among us have plenty to eat, and that is something to be grateful for and never to take for granted. But I do think it might be also a breakthrough for our own organizational skills and being able to structure our lives in a way that will be more effective moving forward. So those are some things to consider with this full moon. And again, we'll break it down in much more depth moving forward. Simon. So I can't do a personal reading for you today, Simon, but if you'd like to go to my website, spencermichaud.com, you can sign up for a reading there. We're just kind of doing the aspects for the collective today. But again, I appreciate you being here. And I think that hopefully we can learn a lot about each other through communicating through the chat and sharing our stories and whatnot. And hopefully you're having a good experience with some of the transits. But I'd be happy to help you with your chart personally. But today we're focusing more on the collective. All right, so we're moving off of this full moon here. And what we're going to do is we are going to look at this January the 14th. So January the 14th is an interesting day because as we are, this week that I was recording this, we were experiencing a Venus trine with Jupiter. And here we have a square. So the Venus-Jupiter trine was from Venus in Aquarius to Jupiter in Gemini. And now, since Venus in the middle of January is in Pisces, it has a square relationship. Now, generally people have experienced squares in modern astrology as friction, as negative, difficult. There is a really interesting way of looking at squares from a Hellenistic worldview, where they think of a planet on the 10th house away from the other planet. So in this case, Venus has a concept called on the 10th, right? Where it is 10 houses away from Jupiter. Okay, think of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And when it's a benefic planet in the overcoming square, that tends to be something that could bring good fortune. If it's a malefic planet like Mars or Saturn, that could be really difficult. In this case, we have both Saturn, a malefic planet in the overcoming square, coming into the overcoming square with Jupiter, but also Venus is there smoothing out the process. So we have both of those conditions. A challenging planet putting pressure on Jupiter, and a benefic planet trying to ease that. So I do think that the Venus-Jupiter square could bring a little bit of tension between our inner vision and our desired pathways that it's a little bit of conflict between the heart and the mind. Like we may have some really passionate emotional experiences, but we are kind of lost in exploring the different intellectual pathways. So I think that that's the main negative connotation that we could possibly be experiencing. But I think for the most part, this can help us dissolve Venus and Pisces, some of the extraneous thoughts that Jupiter and Gemini have been bringing us. Like we are overthinking almost everything with Jupiter and Gemini. With just there's so many options, etc. I think Venus and Pisces says, let's just go with the flow. Let's not overthink this. Let's do something heart-centered today, etc. And I'm gonna have to get a little snack here for a minute. I can feel my blood sugar plummeting, so let's take this opportunity, take a little stretch break. I'm getting into the third hour here. Do me a favor. Please like and subscribe. Subscribe to the newsletter. And just give me a minute to chew so you don't have to hear me chewing. All right. We got to take care of our bodies when we're doing these marathon sessions. I hope you're taking care of your body. We had our Finnish friends take care of their bodies by going to sleep, which is good. Sleep is good. Simon says, of course, I have a question about why Aquarius is in a Pluton. Fascinates astrology. That Aquarius is in, I don't know what a Pluton is, friend. So if you can explain that more, I might have an answer to that. But we don't want to get too far off track here, friend. I appreciate you being here, but we're going to stay on track here today. Lauren says, Venus has been really helpful with these larger transits lately, with Pluto's ingress into Aquarius and here with that stellium in Pisces. Venus has been really helpful with these larger transits lately in Pluto's. Yes, yeah, it's been... the trine has really been helpful, right? Like Venus in Aquarius is helping to smooth out our relationships, like those mycelial relationships, especially if we feel exiled. And I think Pluto and Pisces can really help us see beauty in the world. Like oftentimes I think that as we've moved forward in the past few months, we've seen a lot of really, really challenging things in the news that have probably sapped some of our hope and faith, at least some of us. And I think Venus can help show us the beauty, the universal beauty in the world, and that could be really helpful moving forward. Simon is saying, Aquarius and Pluto fascinates astrology so much. We talked a lot about Pluto and Aquarius. I have a whole live stream on the channel where we talked about Pluto and Aquarius and its meanings and whatnot. So I'm gonna direct you to that so that we could stay focused on the astrology of January today, friend. But yeah, again, appreciate you being here. All right. So let's move forward. So we've talked a little bit about the Venus-Jupiter square. And now let's get to the 15th. And on the 15th is having a big day here. So on January the 15th, we're seeing the Sun and Mars coming into an opposition with one another, while also simultaneously. Whoops. Oh man, I got rid of it. So we have a Mars Sun opposition, and we also have Mercury going under the beams of the sun. So here's our opposition, and then Mercury is going under the beams of the sun within 15 degrees of the sun. So it's literally impossible to talk about those things out of context separately because they're happening on the same day. So the sun opposite Mars, conflicts, conflicts between scarcity versus surplus, awareness of power structures and how that might be affecting our domestic situations. This is in the news, right? Where a lot of the voting topics were related to people really struggling to pay their grocery bill, for example, the cost of living. And here we might have some more difficult conversations about how we get those products, that sustenance to the people, to the masses. Could be some conflicts around that. And probably there's going to be some real difficult conversations with how we administrate and get people what they need. I would expect some really important messages with Mercury going under the beams of the sun. That is called a moment of phasis. And phasis is a fancy Hellenistic term for an omen that speaks. So when we have Mercury going invisible, basically, it's going under the beams of the sun so that you aren't going to be able to see it in the morning anymore. It's in the morning star phase. That means that there's going to be things happening behind the scenes. And we have an initial kind of event that will spur action behind the scenes, both in our personal lives and in the collective. So being able to think about how you're working with others, okay? Mercury is going to be going into the heart of the sun eventually to be renewed in the heart of the sun. I believe that'll be happening in Aquarius season, but that'll be looking ahead towards February. So pay attention to messages that you are receiving around this period of time. It may require you to do some behind the scenes work. It also could be related to, like I said, questions of how much is enough? How do we get what we need? If we have more than we need, how do we get it to the people that need it? And where is how do we craft an identity around our leadership skills, or how our leaders craft identities and their relationship to the public? So I anticipate some challenges with the conversations that come up between leaders and the masses. Now I know that that's not like a revolutionary take, but sometimes those things are more prominent in the news cycle, where we have this kind of disconnect between leaders and the people that they are serving. With an opposition between the sun and Capricorn and Mars and retrograde and Cancer, I think there's a disconnect between the people and their leadership. If it was a trine, maybe there would be a more harmonious conversation. But since this is an opposition, there's a standoff, right? This to me represents a standoff between the government and the people. Maybe this is related to I don't know if this was resolved yet in the news, but we're heading down the barrel of a government shutdown in America, which could have a real negative effect on many things. And maybe there's a showdown that happens that extends out into January. I hope not, but that could be a possibility. All right. So that is our 15th. If we move forward to the 17th, we have just kind of a minor sextile between the sun and Neptune. So a harmonious relationship between the sun and Neptune. Maybe we understand what needs to happen, the sacrifices that need to happen to move forward with our lives. We're going to have that separation from the sun and Mars, the tension between our egos and our fighting spirit is starting to abate on some level, maybe become a little bit dissolved. So that would be positive. When we get to the 17th and the 18th, we're going to see the sun also sextiling the north node, right? So maybe an acceptance of our fate on some level when we have a positive, harmonious interaction with the sun and the nodes. So that's something to look out there. The other thing that's going to be happening on the 18th, and this is kind of fun. I don't know if it's fun necessarily, but it's interesting. This is where we have our Venus-Saturn conjunction. So there's Venus and Saturn coming together at about 16 degrees of Pisces. And this is interesting to me because I think that Venus can do one of two things. I think Venus can soothe the crotchety old man in Saturn and help him see some beauty once again if he's become jaded. I think Venus can also run headlong into the no, right? An ending, like the Great Reaper. So I think it could be both. I think it could be, Venus helping to soothe some of our perceived boundaries, some of our perceived differences, our perceived endings and challenges. And it also could lead to some sobriety on Venus's part. So think about the area of life that both Saturn and Venus are responsible for. I think that the area and topic associated with Capricorn and Aquarius may get some soothing by Venus. The areas and topics associated with both Libra and Taurus may run into some limitations. Okay? So these two planets are having a conversation with one another about certain areas of your life as a mortal, according to Hellenistic planetary theory. Right? So they can have different conversations and be negotiating different things for different, their own different willpowers and desires. So it's multivalent. But I do think that this could be kind of a completion that could lead to a softening, but also could lead to a feeling of finality. Now, the second decan of Pisces, again, is related to the Nine of Cups. And the Nine of Cups shows a figure that's sitting with 9 cups feeling very satisfied. So there could be a satisfied feeling. There could also be an association with this decan around Sorcerer's Apprentice energy, where we are overestimating our abilities that could lead to difficulties. So I would be very careful about overestimating your ability, but in this, because that could lead to disappointment. There is another there's a fixed star around this area. I believe it's called a Chernar, which is a fixed star in the river, the Eridanus. And there is some associations with floods and fires, and the story of Phaethon, who was the driver of Helios's chariot. He was the son that asked to drive Helios's chariot, and he, of course, was not ready to do so. The Helios begged him not to ask that of him, but he did so anyway. And he ended up being shot out of the sky by Zeus with a thunderbolt. So I think that there could also be an ending related to someone who is trying to do something that they're not really ready for yet. And that Venus and Saturn coming together, we have to be really careful about understanding our limitations. Tracy says, thanks, Spencer and everyone. Getting late in the UK here too. Good night and happy Christmas and Yuletide blessings to all. Yeah, have a good holiday season and Yule and solstice, Tracy, and hope that everyone there in the UK is doing well. And thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Appreciate you. All right, let's keep going. We'll get through this. And again, if you've been here for 2 hours, 2.5, thank you so much. If you have to go, no shame. Like, there's a recording of it. You can absorb this in chunks. You know, it's here as a resource for you. But again, do me a huge favor, like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you want to make a donation via the super chat, that's always appreciated, but don't feel obligated. And thank you so much for being here. I know we go marathon sessions, but I like having this information kind of out there in one big swing. And again, just appreciate all the support. Okay, so we've talked about the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, and now we are going over to the 19th, and we have a Mercury sextile with Saturn and Venus. So we have that separation now of Saturn and Venus, and Mercury is now going to sextile that. So our ability to work with others and to communicate with others as what needs to be done, okay, what needs to be done to get the project over the hump, probably we'll get a lot of information with the Venus-Saturn conjunction. Maybe we learn that we don't have the skills necessary to bring the project to completion, and we hire something out. Or we bring someone on board that helps us get things to the finish line. That admitting that we are maybe not ready or capable allows us to be in service of the project itself by finding someone or something or a different way to get the project going. So I think that that's something to think about too. Like admitting that we don't necessarily have all the skills that we need doesn't mean that we're failing. It just means that we're humble enough to admit that we need help. And that might be part of this conversation between Mercury and Saturn and Venus here is how can we get the help that we need if we come up against our limitations? All right. And that gets us to the sun's ingress into Aquarius. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another little stretch here, and we will finish this off with the sun moving through Aquarius. And hopefully that will be helpful for all of you. Do me a huge favor. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Leave me a comment if you're listening after the fact. Let me know you were here. You know, if you have some good, if this was beneficial to you, it's always nice to hear that. If you have something to add about something you've realized about these aspects, it's always fun to hear that. And your stories. It's just nice to know that you're out there. Sometimes I'm just kind of, I don't necessarily feel like I'm talking into the void, but, you know, we are trying to do these things over the interwebs, and it's always nice to feel the people behind the screens every once in a while. Stretch it out, friends. Stretch it out. Okay. So we're in the last little stretch run here, and we're going to be talking about Aquarius season a little bit. All right. Alessandra says this has been incredibly interesting. Oh, thank you, Alessandra. Appreciate you. We're almost done here, but I appreciate you being here, friend. Like, really enjoyed connecting with you a few weeks ago, and I'm just happy you're part of our little live stream community here, friend. All right, so let's talk about Aquarius 1. And here you can see a slide from my Decans of Aquarius webinar that's for sale in my store, if you want to check that out. Here we see we're switching from Pentacles to Swords. And we're talking about the 5 of Swords for this particular decan. And here we see a figure who is collecting swords after what seems to be some kind of conflict. The Book T in the Book of Thoth call this the Lord of Defeat. And we can either be the victor in this scene, or we can be the conquered in this scene. Like we can, oftentimes I've found that most often you see people embracing the exile part of this one. You do have some people in the collective who have utilized this energy to dominate others and to win maybe in an unfair way. But oftentimes when people have placements in this decan, they're choosing to go off into the fringe of society, to be exiled of their own volition. It's a Venus-ruled decan. So there's beauty and attraction to leaving the centralized power or society behind. It's often due to a feeling of injustice. So themes of exclusion, exile, isolation, these are all related to Saturn. These are themes that traditional astrologers talk about with Saturn. It's not the centralized force that the sun is. It's the opposite of that. It's that which is on the fringe. Severity of thought is something that is associated with this decan. Escaping just injustice, refugees and immigrants, really important theme that we're dealing with now in the collective is because of the challenges of climate change and wealth consolidation by very wealthy nations. We are seeing a real difficulty for people in Southern Hemisphere countries and in other countries that have been exploited. Their living spaces are becoming uninhabitable, and that leads to refugees and migrations. A lot of it's due to climate change, right? And this is a theme that in America people are getting really bent out of shape about, because they have been told that people are coming for their resources. Now here's my opinion. This is my opinion, but that is a sleight of hand to be able to create a scapegoat to distract from the fact that the oligarchs are consolidating wealth and power. So that to me is part of this challenge that we're going through. And I know Simon was talking about why are astrologers focusing on Pluto and Aquarius? Well, because people are going to be feeling more and more exiled as we see more and more of this consolidation of wealth. The themes of being able to find your, be able to find your community, even if that community is not in power, is going to become more and more prevalent in our mindset. It's also going to be leading potentially to sacrificing our security for freedom. You know, when the powers that be, if you don't agree with them ethically, sometimes you have to sacrifice being in the in crowd to be able to stay true to yourself. And that could be part of our experience. So this is also, since it's Venus ruled, bizarre aesthetics and eclectic tastes could be something that we're dealing with. Venus, they talk about this in Austin Kopich's book, about Venus working with resources of a quote unquote lower quality or value. And they compare it to a coppersmith instead of someone who works with gold or silver. Doesn't mean we can't create something beautiful with that, but oftentimes people that have prominent placements in Aquarius 1 will take and repurpose things that people have discarded and create something beautiful with it. Of course, our friend Alessandra here creates this amazing she does amazing art, repurposing old photographs, and makes these beautiful collages that highlight people of diverse backgrounds, which is really cool. So she's a wonderful example of Aquarius 1 as an artist. I believe, Alessandra, you have Venus in this decan, so in its own face. So that's a really great example of things that we can focus on when we're dealing with Aquarius 1 in the positive, right? Being able to create beauty on the fringe and with things that people have discarded. Rachel says, thank you for this fabulous and comprehensive January outlook, especially on Tanya's special day. Thank you, Rachel Fletcher, for being here. And thank you for, all of your beautiful contributions to our community and being a part of it. So appreciate you, friend. Yeah, check out Alessandra. She's got some really cool art online. Yeah, and feel free to tell us where we can find you, Alessandra, as far as your art. That would be great. Hopefully we can get you some business. So the negative side of Aquarius 1 can be like this experience of schadenfreude, right? We talked about this earlier, the pain of comparison, taking joy in seeing someone get their comeuppance, right? This is something that Pluto and Aquarius has really taught us too, with the people seemingly taking pleasure in someone's death. And it's not that they are happy that someone died. I don't think that is the the overarching thing and takeaway. It's that they are feeling pain themselves, and that person became a symbol of that pain. So if you think about Aquarius, it's an air sign. It is an intellectual, symbolic sign, right? So people can represent ideas. And that CEO was not just a human being to the collective, although we still should treat him as a human being. This is where we have to play the balancing act. But he represented an ideal, and that ideal was the corruption of the medical system that goes and denies people coverage for healthcare that they have bought and paid for many years, and in turn leads to many people's death and or medical debt. So that to me is the essence of Schadenfreude, is because people have experienced suffering themselves, seeing someone else who has become a symbol of that suffering, they are taking pleasure within it. I'm not saying it's right, but understanding where that comes from, we can separate the individual from the ideal, and we can still appreciate and support the humanity of individuals while pushing back against the ideal that they represent. You see what I'm saying? It's a difference. So things to ask yourself with Aquarius 1, when the sun is moving through this from January the 19th to January 29th. How can you effectively break away from the herd and find beauty in doing so and freedom in doing so? Can you turn your alienation into independence so that you're not dependent on whatever the system is that is, maybe viewed as unjust? How can you close the gap between expectations and reality? Remember, we're dealing with an idealistic air sign. So sometimes we can feel disappointment because reality doesn't always match with our idealism. Aquarius is a very idealistic folks, but they're also realists, okay? Like they're trying to create structure, but ideal structure through lawmaking. Like this is the ultimate sign of making laws, in my opinion. Yes, we can talk about Libra as a lawmaking sign, but that's more about justice. Aquarius is what makes the structure of society because of Saturn's ability to structure things and create limitations. We have to have limitations in our agreements with one another, or there'd just be chaos. And Aquarius that's one of its fundamental functions. So what beauty is to be found out on the frontier? Okay, can you turn another's trash into your treasure, like we see Alessandra doing? And then how can you quiet the mind of its turbulence, right? So that we can understand how to make the changes that we need to make without necessarily taking pleasure in one individual's demise. How can we change the structure of something while that needs to be changed? I think those are good questions to ask during this period of time. So we go back to our chart, and we're going to see the very first aspect is the sun's conjunction with Pluto. So this to me is a really important moment for our astrology in January. We have Pluto and the sun coming together, and I'll move days so you can see this. There it is, Pluto and the sun coming together between January 19th and January 21st. Okay. And to me, this is there's no coincidence that it coincides with a new administration coming in American politics, one that is probably highlighting the haves and the have-nots. It has literally been one of the incoming administration's talking points that they ran on, that they campaigned on, to create more refugees from or deport immigrants in our country, right, in America. So this is going to be highlighting that particular fear. Pluto can often represent fear, what we are afraid of. Many people in this country are afraid of being exiled, and not just immigrants. Okay, people are afraid of being cast aside. People in the LGBTQ plus community are afraid of being cast aside by forces that will seek to take away their rights. Women are afraid of being cast aside by people taking away their rights. So there are a number of different demographics that are afraid of the rhetoric that happened in the last few months and what that means moving forward for the structure of our society. There's also other challenges around this. Like, this is also a period of time that they are talking about shutting down Twitter. So this could also be a very big spotlight on the other theme of Aquarius that is very much related to the limitation of information. Where, again, I'll repeat, we've already seen multiple lawsuits against news organizations in the past few weeks, trying to control a narrative, and anyone that disagrees with the narrative that the powerful people are putting out is going to be sued or silenced or whatnot. This shutting down Twitter takes away the voice for millions of people. Millions of people have their voices silenced by shutting that down. Now, am I a huge fan of Twitter? I don't even have a Twitter account, to be honest with you. Not Twitter. What am I talking about? Twitter. If I meant TikTok. Okay, sorry. If I've said Twitter over the last few sentences, it's because I'm starting to get a little fatigued and hungry. But I meant TikTok. They're thinking about shutting down TikTok. Twitter is a whole other thing. Twitter has also already become taken over by a very wealthy man who is controlling its algorithm and changing the way that people interact with information. But TikTok is what's going to be potentially shut down around this period of time. And TikTok is another social media organization that people sometimes look to get their news, Again, I'm not a huge TikTok user. There's some parts about it that don't resonate with me. But I think for a lot of people, it's an outlet. And silencing people's voices, this could be a mass silencing of those voices, which could lead to some negative outcomes. So this is real complicated stuff, right? We're dealing with a very communal challenge. This could also be representing some fears that people have about the corruption around not sharing. Like, we all are sharing this planet, and a lot of us, myself included, are very worried about the changes in our climate, our habitats, and some of the new laws that might roll back environmental protections. Those are some things that are very important to me. Like, I'm very involved in repopulating native pollinator habitats in my own local community. And I love birds, animals, trees, and I don't think that corporations should have free run to do whatever they want, and that the environment should bear the brunt of that. And that's another thing that we might be experiencing with some of these challenges. So I think that this is going to be a really poignant time where we're getting like I said, a big spotlight and a big clarification on the things that we fear, the things that have fallen into corruption. And it is a seeding moment for the Pluto cycle that's going to unfold over the next 20 years. It's like a Pluto Kazemi, basically. And it is seeding those next events. Now, this happens every year. Sun will conjoin Pluto every year and seeding the challenges that we're going for the next year. So it's not like it's a once in a 20-year thing. But I do think that it's important because it's the first time that Pluto, I believe, it's the first time that Pluto and the Sun have come together in Aquarius in over 240 some odd years. So that's a big deal. So pay attention to what's happening between those days. I think it's going to be big for the collective, not just as individuals. Lauren says, you just explained that disassociative quality of Aquarius perfectly. Oh, thank you, friend. Twitter and Facebook Live was very, very important during Standing Rock and Black Lives Matters movements in delivering and documenting events in real time, as well as the war in Syria. Yeah, exactly. Like social media is like a way for people to communicate outside of the established channels. So silencing that is yet another attempt towards oppression and censorship. So it's hopefully it won't happen. Even though, like I said, it's not, that particular platform is not my thing, but I do think it should be allowed to exist. Many truths cannot be censored in time, and that actually helped deliver very real truths that otherwise would have had been stories instead of truthful and pure broadcasts, however hard to digest. Yeah, exactly. And they want to shut it down because they want to control the narrative. That is an Aquarian, Pluto and Aquarius challenge, is people in power trying to control the narrative by only showing you one part of it. And that part of it is in support of their agenda. And that's not freedom. That's not freedom of speech. That's not freedom of press. That is censorship and oppression. So these are the things that we're going to have to be aware of and push back against. Lawrence says it's about accessibility of those networks, not the outlet of itself. Exactly. Exactly. Okay, so that's a big one, that Sun-Pluto conjunction in the month ahead. That is simultaneously taking place on the 21st here. If we move forward a day on our chart, this is simultaneously happening with a last quarter moon. So if you look at the moon in Scorpio, second 10-degree section of Scorpio, it's squaring the sun as it starts to separate. Friends, the last quarter moon is a releasing moon. It is one where we're kind of feeling change and an existential crisis. Second decan of Scorpio, first of all, this is almost near the maximum degree of the moon's fall in Scorpio. So this is a really tough spot for the moon. It is also in a decan related to grief and mourning. I'm going to tell you what, for many Americans, for at least 48% of Americans, this is going to be a very, very difficult day and week. Seeing this transition to what we perceive as an authoritarian regime that is going to try to limit people's freedoms. So there will at least be half of the country that will be in a great period of mourning after this inauguration. So I think that if you are in that 48 to 50%, take your time. You know, realize that there's going to be a lot of challenges around your belief systems being challenged, that there's going to be really a marathon that we're going to have to run rather than a sprint. But feel your feelings. If you are feeling grief, and it doesn't even just have to be political grief. For me, the grief I'm feeling, it's just so many different facets to it. But I think that, like I said, the thing that just gets to me the most, I'm grieving for this beautiful planet. I'm grieving for the potential to roll back all of the protections that we have on our rivers and our lakes and our oceans, our air, the animal friends that we have. All of those things I find great sadness in. And again, to me, it's a result of just rampant greed, Wendigo mindset. And it will lead to some pain. So feel your feelings. Allow yourself to grieve. And then wipe the snot off your face and get ready for a fight. And I mean that in the best possible way. And I don't think it's necessarily even just what are you willing to fight against? What are you fighting for? To me, I'm fighting for the birds in my backyard that visit my bird feeders. I'm fighting for the trees and that give me oxygen. Fighting for my daughter as a woman in a difficult position in society. Fighting for my partner who's a black woman in a society that doesn't always value people who are different. I'm fighting for my trans neighbors in my neighborhood that are beautiful people that are trying to live their lives. A really strong gay community in my town of Ypsilanti. I'm fighting for all of them, these beautiful people that are my neighbors. I'm fighting for them. So think about what you're fighting for. Feel your grief about what might be to come, but then pick yourself up off that map pretty quickly and figure out how your love is going to overcome whatever hate comes. All right. Let me compose myself for a minute. Just feeling the emotions. I'm pre-feeling the grief. Like, it's pre-feeling it. KP says, didn't the sun conjoin Pluto earlier this year before Pluto dipped back into Capricorn? I'm not sure. Let's check it. So, I don't know if it conjoined Pluto in Aquarius. So there's the 21st. There's January 20th of 2024, and that was in Capricorn. It was in very final degrees of Capricorn. So I really don't think we haven't had a Pluto and Aquarius conjunction. But yeah, it conjoins Pluto every year. So we had the last one in Capricorn. Lauren says, Mars in Cancer is about standing strong, the ability to hold your head above water, and then your arms above your head. A refusal to poison the waters as the depths are felt. Ooh, I like that. That's a nice reflection, Lauren. Yeah, thank you, Simon. Again, I appreciate you being here, friend. I'm sorry I wasn't able to go into depth with your chart, but I value you as a member of our community. And again, if you need some more guidance, I'd be happy to work with you individually. All right, let's keep going. What do you say? Let's keep on rolling. We'll get to the end of this here. So as we move past the last quarter moon, we're going to move towards the 23rd of January. That's a big day. The 23rd, there's a Mars retrograde sextiling Uranus. So there's Mars in Cancer sextiling Uranus. Mercury is going to be opposite Mars on that day. And then Mercury is also going to be trining Uranus. Okay, so one difficult aspect with Mercury opposite Mars, probably elevated rhetoric, like when authoritarian power structures take over, then they know that they are able to say and do more of what they want. So there will probably be elevated rhetoric in the days after that. We have to be real careful about expressing our own anger and communicating our own fear and things of that nature. We have Mercury making that beautiful trine to Uranus, though. So being able to break out of preconceived patterns and notions, etc., really important. Being able to see things from a new perspective and administrate the material structures of our life slightly differently could lead to hopefully some more positive outcomes. When we get to the 25th, there we have Venus making a trine, an overcoming trine to Mars in Cancer. So I like this aspect. This is an aspect that is helping to soothe some of the challenges that we might be experiencing with Mars retrograde, right? An overcoming square is positive from a benefic, but an overcoming trine, that's maybe even better, right? A harmonious, smooth aspect, potentially. So this could be something where we're understanding the sacrifices that we're going to need to make to be able to bring about support for one another in our communities. And I think that we are sometimes tragedy, sometimes inequality, sometimes pain and suffering brings us together. It is a great equalizer. I think that after we've had that cathartic moment at the last quarter moon in Scorpio, how do we reaffirm our love for one another, right? This to me is the Venus coming near Neptune. It's going to happen at Venus's maximum degree of exaltation. That is super powerful. You know, once we get past the shock of it all, great love can be the antidote to that. So I'm really curious to see how that turns out. And again, Venus, Aphrodite, was the consort of Ares or Mars in ancient Greek mythology. And she was one of the only forces that could soothe the savage beast that was Mars. So great love, great pleasure can help overcome some of those conflicts. The harmonization of conflicts could be part of this. When we get to the 26th of January, we have Mercury sextiling Neptune and Venus sextiling Uranus. Okay, so just some minor but harmonious and positive aspects, some good conversations what we might be having, some positive but maybe unexpected benefits could come on the 26th. And then we have Mercury ingressing into Aquarius on the 27th. So here we see Mercury at the final degrees of Capricorn, and it will ingress, okay, into Aquarius. Right here, it's moving really quickly. Ooh, that's because I went too many days ahead. So this is the 27th. I meant to go hours. So here is, there's Mercury, moving into Aquarius 1. Similar themes as we were talking about with the Sun in Aquarius 1 with but Mercury is a little bit different. The Sun will create an awareness from its exile. Mercury is going to create a conversation, okay? If the Sun is a big spotlight and an identity and power consolidation, Mercury is a doubt caster. It helps us to ask questions and communicate in that area. And to me, this is a really interesting time, the 27th through the 28th or so, because we see this big stack up of the Moon, Mercury, and Pluto all in Aquarius here. So, and the Sun. So look at this big stellium that we have a few hours into like the 28th, you know, as we get out of the Capricorn moon. Look at this big stack up. So just a lot of focus on the exiled folks in society. A lot of focus on how to create beauty going off into the fringe, how to create beauty in our mycelial networks with one another, even if we're not feeling supported by our central governing body or by the prevailing narrative that is allowed to come through. And I want to be real clear about that. It can be really challenging. I'm talking to all you exiles out there. You know, all you people that feel lonely and cast out right now. It can feel like we're up against the entire world because the narrative that is allowed to come through is kind of toxic and othering. But I want you to understand that I don't think everyone feels that way. I think that when you have a control of media, etc., only one particular narrative is allowed to come through, and it's the one that supports the power and the control. And, you know, that to me is really reassuring because it doesn't mean that everyone actually feels this way. It just means that that's the one narrative that's allowed to be shared. And we have to keep sharing our love for one another, right? In ways that, you know, maybe they have to be coded. Maybe they have to be, I don't know, metaphors. Maybe they can't be as direct as they might have normally been at the risk of being censored. But there's still ways to communicate, I think, with each other in that way. But to me, that is a really interesting stack up that can bring that focal point back to those that have been cast out. And maybe having communications between ourselves, figuring out where the channels that we can communicate are, I think are going to be important moving forward. KP says January 20th, it was weird because they sort of came in together. Yeah, absolutely, right? So this leads us to our last two aspects for the month. And thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Those of you who have stuck it out for the long haul here, appreciate you. I hope that we've brought you some clarity and maybe even some peace today. I know we've stirred the pot a little bit, but I think it's important to be true to ourselves. And I'm trying to be true to myself and true to the people that I care about today. And sometimes it's uncomfortable. And it takes a lot of courage, I think, sometimes to do so. Sometimes we're capable of doing that, and other days we don't have it in us. But hopefully today we've highlighted some themes to watch out for, and I hope validated some of your experiences as well. Because I think one of the things that's dangerous is when we try to pretend like everything's fine when it isn't. It's invalidating to our lived experience. And our lived experience isn't always exactly the same as everyone else's. And to be able to acknowledge the best lived experience, we have to be able to acknowledge the most challenging lived experience as well. And I think this is another thing that we can think about with the new moon in Aquarius at 9 degrees of Aquarius on the 29th. There we have an even bigger Aquarian stellium with Pluto, Mercury, the moon, and the sun all hanging out in that first 10-degree section of Aquarius. This is the new start where we may be having to work on our networks on the fringe. We have to work on connecting with the beauty of exile, the beauty of the frontier. We may be feeling like we want to leave some kind of centralized power, civilization, etc., to be able to create a life that is based on freedom, but rather than based on control. This is going to be a new moon that's hosted by Saturn in Pisces, and Saturn's in aversion, so it is not necessarily able to get the resources that it needs. So there could be some confusion around that. But I think that, like anything, we have some positive aspects here. We have a whole sign trine to the new moon, to Jupiter in Gemini. So I think that we'll have options. I think this is a good new moon to explore your options when it comes to creating the life that you want to live, even if it's not necessarily supported by the centralized forces. And I will do an entire live stream on this new moon. Lauren says, knowing what's coming up as possible outcomes, no matter how challenging, can help prepare us emotionally and energetically so that our system is not in shock. Ooh, I like that. Yes, absolutely. And here's the thing. I would love to be wrong about a lot of these things. I would love for the worst possible outcomes not to manifest. So we'll see. Lauren says, we're better able to move through these energies in a positive, prepared action. I agree, friend. And if astrology can't prepare us to move through our future with grace, then what are we doing here? Right? What are we doing here? This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to prepare ourselves mentally, emotionally, and physically for what may come through the language of the planets, of the stars, and of these charts. So, yeah, exactly. What are we doing if it's not preparing ourselves? Yeah, Lauren. Finally, on the 30th, Uranus is going to station direct. Okay, the planet of rebellion and revolution stations direct right after this new moon. So I think we'll have an idea of what is going to be called upon to change, while simultaneously the sun is going to trine Jupiter retrograde. So I think that this could be a positive end to the month. We have to go through some of the shit, right, to get to the ideals that will lead us out of the corrupt experience and into, hopefully, a more better, fair, just, and joyful future. Don't lose faith, friends. Stay connected to what you are advocating for. It's so easy to get wrapped up in what you are advocating against. The people that want to control hearts and minds will try to separate you by othering and by casting a shadow and creating scapegoats. You don't let them do that by understanding what you are fighting for. Understand who you are, what your great love is supporting. So please keep that in mind as we go forward in this very transformative time, if nothing else. All right, friends, I have a couple more things for you. Here we have the hexagram. And this hexagram, I got hexagram with no changing lines, number 25. It translates to innocence. And this is interesting to me because the idea of innocence in the I Ching is a little bit different than our childish innocence. The I Ching describes innocence as being without expectations, without guile, acting naturally, being spontaneous, and embracing the unexpected. So this to me is, I'm going to read to you from Jack Balkin's beautiful translation, The Laws of Change. He says, in the Book of Changes, innocence does not carry the Christian connotation of being without sin. Rather, to be innocent means to be genuine, sincere, and unaffected, without guile or deceit. For similar reasons, innocence does not mean being naive or unaware of one's surroundings. A wild animal acts naturally and instinctively, but its senses are often finely attuned to its environment. To act innocently means to act spontaneously and naturally without ulterior motives. However, human innocence means more than this. Being aggressive, selfish, and depraved, because aggressive, selfish, and depraved behavior can also be spontaneous, innocence has a necessary moral dimension. It means doing the right thing for its own sake without thought of reward. Very Aquarian, right? An innocent person is naturally drawn to what is good and right and moves in this direction instinctively and without ceremony or calculation, without manipulation or deceit. So the highest part of Aquarius, the highest ideal of Aquarius, is altruism. In its lower form, brainwashing. In its highest form, doing what is necessary even without thought of reward for yourself. Thinking about doing something great for the collective. Okay? So to me, this is a period where I think it's teaching us that it is important not to go in with one expectation or the other. Remember, we talked about the North Node in Pisces and about recognizing that there is a divine plan at work and that we have to be fluid. When we're faced with change, allow the story to unfold, while also being aware of your surroundings and your safety and other people's safety. Okay. And how do we maintain a natural reaction to what's happening? Maybe the natural reaction is to push back on what we see as abuses, but maybe the natural reaction is to hold fast and to stop and evaluate. Try not to get too caught up in what you think is going to happen or what you think you need to do, because there may be some surprises, I think, is what this is saying. And we need to be able to be fluid enough to engage with it in a healthy manner. Now, the animal I got for you is really interesting. Look at this beautiful, beautiful great horned owl. So I got the owl. I got the owl for you, friends. And the owl, I love the symbolism of the owl. The owl is a beautiful, beautiful animal who has been associated with wisdom, with adaptability, resourcefulness. It has silent flight. It hunts in silence. Its feathers are specifically evolved to not create noise. And I think that is a really important message from the owls. We may be doing some really good work, but in the shadows, in silence, we don't necessarily have to go in trumpets blaring. We have to be kind of like Batman or like Owlman, where we have silent protectors, right? That becomes equally more important in times of censorship and oppression. And An owl notices what's happening around them due to their ability to turn their neck almost 360 degrees. Okay? So noticing what's happening on the fringe of your society, not putting your head down in the sand like an ostrich and ignoring things that happen if you see an injustice. Owls have X-ray, basically like X-ray vision, not X-ray vision, but they can see in the dark. So we need to be able to trust our gut about what is really happening, even when the narrative that we are being fed is one that everything is fine, everything's okay, don't worry about it. Trust your intuition. Don't trust the gaslighting. It's really important. I think that owl seems like an animal that is a great bullshit detector. And we need to have our bullshit detectors on as we move forward into Aquarius season. We need to understand when the narrative is being crafted around a certain support of a certain power structure. And we need to be aware of when our intuition says, this isn't right. This doesn't feel right. Like maybe we need to not buy into this potentially. It is also representative of a symbolic death. Owl often is a herald in many cultures of a death. And in this case, we might be having the death of a certain set of expectations, certain set of circumstances. Could be hopefully, but not, I hope, I don't even want to speak this into existence, but it could be the death of democracy, unless we do something about it. I think that it's very important to realize that with every change, we are dealing with a need for adjustment and a need to come into alignment with the new circumstances. And I think owl helps us to do that too. Now, here's the other thing I love about owl, and this is just, I'm thinking about this off the top of my head. When an owl consumes something, so when you consume information, they take it in fully. They consume the mouse, whatever it is, they swallow it whole. They're going to process and digest that, and they are going to shat out the owl pellet. They're going to eliminate the fur, the teeth, the bones, anything that doesn't serve them. I think this is how we need to be with this owl medicine and energy. If we are being fed something, we probably will consume it, but we don't have to, it doesn't have to become a part of us. All of that stuff that isn't in alignment, that doesn't support our bodies, our mental health, our emotional health, it doesn't have to be a part of us. And the owl is teaching us to be able to discern fact from fiction, to see through the whatever lies, rhetoric, control of information, and to only take in that which is supporting us and to be able to eliminate the rest of it. Okay, friends, I think that's what I've got for you today. Hang in there. Got this. Painted Turtle says, I love owl energy. The owl is one of my spirit guide animals, and I love it too. It's beautiful. I saw a beautiful barred owl a few years ago during the daytime, and it just had a really transcendent effect on my life at the moment. And it's a gorgeous, gorgeous animal, and I hope that it will serve you well in the month ahead. Lauren also says they have a specific friend call. They hoot in a pattern that both says they are friendly and seeks to hear the same echoed back. It's subtle and pure. They kind of stay in place and acknowledge that the other is out there. Yeah, I love that. Oh, that's beautiful. So hoot to your friends, wait for the echo back, and support one another. KP says, thank you, Spencer. Happy birthday to Tanya. Yes, let's celebrate Tanya and her birthday today. Much love to everyone here. Appreciate all of you, friends. Again, thank you so much for being a part of our community. Hang in there. Go check me out over at spencermichaud.com. If you need extra help and guidance through this time, I'd be happy to work with you. You can find readings on the Book Now button. There are learning materials in the store. You can follow me over at Instagram, Blue Sky, and over at Threads at Spencer Michaud. Sign up for the newsletter if you want to know when we're going live again. And just be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Give yourself some grace during this period of time. Thank you, Alessandra, for being here, and I hope you have a lovely holiday as well. Thank you, Painted Turtle, for your wisdom that you've been sharing. Appreciate you. I love these feathers here. Just try to pace yourself with all of this. And with this month ahead, I think that this is a really supercharged month, and I think that there's going to be a lot of feelings and uh, a lot of things that are coming from the depths, and a lot of things where we might feel powerless, but I think we are truly more powerful as a collective when we work together and support one another. And that to me is the way through. The way through is together in our mycelial networks. So hang in there, give yourself some grace, and practice kindness. You know, you can be kind in the face of hate and rhetoric, and I think that's the best counterbalance to it. So take care, and I will see you the next time, friends. Peace.